Black and White by Liu Jiming, translated by Chen Gang. Part 3, Volume 2, Chapter 4, 1, In the Ward. When Chen Yimeng was about to leave, Song Qiankun initially wanted to stand and see him off, showing respect to the new provincial party secretary. However, his legs were weak like cotton, and despite attempting to support himself on the sofa, he could not rise. He could only wave his hand, asking his wife, Luo Yi, to see the guest out. As the footsteps faded, Song Qiankun was left alone in the room. He closed his eyes, and mixed emotions swept over him. Chen Yimeng's appearance was like a film still frozen in his mind. His tall build, thick black eyebrows, straight nose, and slightly protruding chin, all remarkably similar to Chen Dage, Big Chen. In fact, when he first saw Chen Yimeng, he had momentarily experienced an illusion of seeing Big Chen standing before him. Could father and son truly look so alike? Song Qiankun felt somewhat dazed, as if transported back over 50 years to when Dazhang City was just liberated. The troops who had broken through the city were his brother-in-law, Hong Hu, and Big Chen, the main and deputy commanders of the unit, along with a short political commissar named Gu with a somewhat scholarly demeanor. These three had just completed the Huaihai campaign, advancing southward like an unstoppable force, capturing Dazhang City, the provincial capital that the Kuomintang boasted was impregnable, within a week. After Dazhang's liberation, Big Chen and Hong Hu continued southward, while the short political commissar Gu remained, serving as the deputy director of the Dongjiang military administration. After the provincial government was established, he became provincial governor, deputy party secretary, and eventually party secretary. Later, when someone reported that he had betrayed party secrets and defected on the eve of liberation, Gu decided to suspend and investigate the accusation. Fortunately, his brother-in-law, Hong Hu, intervened, and the central leadership ultimately canceled the investigation. Before this, Song Qiankun had written a well-received long novel, Majestic Song of Grand River, during his spare time, which reflected underground work in Dazhang. Reportedly, Gu was displeased, privately telling others that Song neglected his proper duties. At the time, intellectually trained cadres like them were rare in the Dongjiang Provincial Committee. After all, scholars have traditionally been critical of one another. From that point forward, Song Qiankun harbored a persistent grudge against Gu, always feeling that he was jealous and deliberately suppressing him. Behind his back, he would refer to Gu as the Short One to show his contempt. Due to this, shortly after being cleared of investigation, he sought a transfer to Beijing. When the Short One was transferred to central work, Song applied to return to Dongjiang and was soon promoted to Provincial Propaganda Department head, Standing Committee Secretary, Vitsu Governor, and Vitsu Party Secretary. Had the Short One still been the Provincial Party Secretary, Song's promotions would certainly not have been so smooth. Later, Song heard from his brother-in-law, Hong Hu, that in the late 1980s, he had been in line to become the Provincial Party Secretary, but with one word from the Short One working in the central government, his path was blocked entirely. Song Qiankun never expected Big Chen's son to become the Dongjiang Provincial Party Secretary decades later. He received this news while in the high-ranking ward of the provincial outpatient clinic. A physical examination had revealed high, low-density lipoprotein, which for a diabetic patient of his advanced age meant an imminent risk of cerebral thrombosis and sudden death. The doctors recommended hospitalization. On the second day of his hospitalization, Provincial Governor Luo Baochang and Propaganda Department head Lang Tao visited him in the hospital and informed him about the new party secretary. When he heard that Chen Yimeng had personally gone to the Dongjiang steel factory on his first day to handle a worker gathering, causing all standing committee members to wait all morning, he couldn't help but recall a similar incident when the Short One was the provincial party secretary. Back then, during a bus driver's strike that had paralyzed Dazhang City's transportation, the Short One had personally gone to the transportation company and resolved the driver's difficulties on site. Song Qiankun was one of the few accompanying staff members at the time. When facing the emotional bus drivers, the party secretary's calm and adaptive demeanor left a deep impression on him. After returning from the strike scene, he instructed provincial newspaper reporters to write a report, lavishly praising the party secretary's people-oriented style. Unexpectedly, after the article was published, the short one was not pleased. During a provincial standing committee meeting, he had said in front of the propaganda department head, "News reports should reflect more of the people's voices and less sing praise to leaders." This was clearly a subtle criticism of Song, who was then the deputy head of propaganda responsible for news. Now, in the new party secretary's actions, Song Qiankun seemed to see the shadow of the short one. Not unworthy of having been his secretary, Song Qiankun muttered to himself, a fleeting shadow crossing his mind, though his face revealed nothing. At that moment, Luo Baochang and Lang Tao, standing by his hospital bed, didn't understand who he meant by that person and looked somewhat puzzled. Among the current Dongjiang province leadership, perhaps only these two could be considered Song Qiankun's people. Among Song's several secretaries over the years, Luo Baochang was the one he appreciated most. Not only was he quick with a pen, drafting speeches that required almost no corrections, but he was also mentally agile, quickly grasping leadership instructions with just a few words. Based on his long experience of observing people, Song Qiankun felt that Luo was capable of great things. Thus, he soon dispatched Luo to grassroots work for training. Cultivating important cadres through grassroots experience was a necessary party path. Luo Baochang did not disappoint Song Qiankun's careful cultivation and high expectations, ultimately ascending to the position of Dongjiang provincial governor. With his seniority and achievements as governor over the years, Luo's succession as party secretary seemed logical. The organization department had even conducted routine investigations on him. Unexpectedly, a wild card emerged mid-process. The central leadership transferred a secretary from elsewhere, and moreover, one who had previously served as secretary to the short one, Chen Yimeng. Looking at Luo Baochang's somewhat dim expression, Song Qiankun couldn't help but feel a bit sympathetic toward this former secretary. Upon taking office, Chen Yimeng's opening salvo had caught Luo Baochang off guard. Song thought Luo, like himself previously, had been replaced at a critical moment, and moreover, it was connected to the short one, truly a case of destined adversaries. Song Qiankun's gaze shifted to Lang Tao. Looking at this handsome, refined, and young propaganda department head, he seemed to see his younger self. In his youth, he too had been this elegant and talented, with tremendous potential for a political career. He could have reached much higher political stages. Still, timing and circumstances were against him, repeatedly encountering setbacks at critical moments, from being reported in the 1950s to being imprisoned as a capitalist roader during the Cultural Revolution, to being disciplined in the 1980s over the South Lake Villa incident. For a long time, Song Qiankun had been resentful of the injustices he'd suffered. But as he aged, he gradually became calmer and accepting. Time and circumstance. He increasingly believed in destiny, feeling that both nations and individuals were ultimately bound by fate. If even a great figure like Zhang Da could meet such a tragic end, what right did he have to complain? Seeing Song Qiankun's gaze, Lang Tao stepped forward to the hospital bed and presented a bouquet of carnations. Song Qiankun accepted the flowers, brought them close to his nose, and a gentle, grandfatherly smile emerged. His expression suggested he saw not a provincial standing committee propaganda department head, but a younger family member. After all, Lang Tao's father, Professor Lang Yongliang, and Father Ai had been his comrades during the May 7th cadre school period. Their families could be considered old acquaintances. Song Qiankun played a role in Lang Tao's transition from academia to politics. Still, crucially, Lang was genuinely talented. A returning overseas doctorate holder and university professor, he fit the party's policy of cadre intellectualization during the reform era. Moreover, Lang's achievements were noteworthy. From developing Phoenix Island in the Niangzhu Lake area to establishing Dongjiang's first cultural industry media group stock listing, he was at the forefront of national cultural industry reform. Without such remarkable work achievements, a mere recommendation from Song Qiankun wouldn't have been convincing. Fundamentally, including Luo Baochang, they belonged neither to any individual nor any particular faction, but were instead valuable assets and the backbone of the party and national cause. The shadow in Song Qiankun's heart seemed to dissipate. Seeing Luo Baochang and Lang Tao's somewhat uneasy expressions, he understood they hadn't come solely to visit him. He asked the nurse to bring 2 chairs for them to sit in. The hospital room was spacious and contained only him and a dedicated nurse. Recently disinfected, it carried a mixed scent of disinfectant and flowers. As this was a personal visit, neither Luo nor Lang had brought their secretaries. Only the 3 of them were present. "It seems the new party secretary has created quite a hassle for you," Song Qiankun said, pointing his finger at Luo Baochang. "I heard you've also been hospitalized. Are you going on strike?" His tone carried a hint of mockery. Luo Baochang's face slightly reddened. He neither nodded nor shook his head, effectively confirming Song's statement. "Giving up when facing a challenge? That's not befitting a provincial governor." Song Qiankun frowned critically. "The central leadership approved the restructuring and merger of Dongjiang Steel. You're merely executing the central decision on state-owned enterprise reform. What is there to be afraid of? Any problems in the reform process can only be solved through further reform, not by using them as an excuse to halt reform. Since that's the case, there's no reason to worry that the new party secretary will completely negate Dongjiang Steel's reform achievements over the years. This doesn't align with dialectical thinking or the central leadership's spirit. Eastern Steel's reforms began in the 1980s. I was still working then and had the right to speak about this. The entire Dongjiang province's reform used Eastern Steel as a breakthrough point, spreading gradually from this focal point to the entire province." Song Qiankun paused, as he used to do during reports. "What was the new secretary's name again?" His mind momentarily blanked. "Chen Yimeng," Luo Baochang responded, seemingly reluctant to mention the name. "Right, Chen Yimeng. I knew his father, Big Chen. That's not important. What's important is that he was secretary to... Well, you know who I mean. Don't think the new secretary has some special background and get nervous. This mentality is incorrect. Regardless of who he is, he's a party cadre, and everything should prioritize the party and national cause." He continued, "I know something about the new secretary. He was once known for bold reforms and was nicknamed Chen Whirlwind. He couldn't possibly become a reform obstacle after arriving in Dongjiang. Using the Eastern Steel issue is likely just his way of establishing authority, the typical 3 fires of a new official. You needn't be too anxious. As for personal promotions, it's best to look at them lightly. Just look at me. I've experienced numerous ups and downs over these decades and still made it through." Song Qiankun's seemingly rambling words did not contain a single superfluous sentence. The last statement was clearly directed at Luo Baochang, revealing the perspective of a seasoned veteran, transparent and open-minded. Turning to Lang Tao, Song Qiankun asked, "I heard the popular arts stock is about to go public. Your propaganda department originally planned a grand celebration, but after the new secretary's arrival, you decided to scale it down and reduce its significance. What are you worried about?" In Lang Tao's mind, Song Qiankun was not just a former leader but also a respected elder. Their conversations typically focused on personal matters, rarely touching on work issues. He was puzzled about how the old man knew such specific details. For a moment, Du Wei's image flashed in his mind. Recently, Du Wei resisted Lang Tao's decision to compress and reduce the celebration's scale. Trying to conceal his inner discomfort, Lang Tao spoke evasively. "Song Lao, well, this..." Song Qiankun, unaware of Lang Tao's inner thoughts, coughed and continued. "Popular Arts is the province's first listed cultural media company. It has demonstrative significance for Dongjiang's cultural industry reforms. Not only should you not reduce the celebration's scale, but you should seize this opportunity, organize it grandly, and create a significant impact. Not only should you, as propaganda head, attend, but the provincial governor should also be present. Through this celebration, you can take the initiative and quickly escape the current passive situation. Song Lao, the governor and I have both attended, Lang Tao said, exchanging a glance with Luo Baochang. Satisfied, Song Qiankun said, and nodded. Luo Baochang and Lang Tao had been dejected since entering the hospital room. After hearing the old leader's speech, they felt clouds had parted to reveal sunlight. Just as they were about to speak, they saw Song Qiankun close his eyes and breathe heavily, clearly tired from his lengthy speech. At that moment, a nurse entered, telling Song Qiankun it was time for his medication. Luo Baochang and Lang Tao stood up and took their leave. 2. Special mission. The day after Provincial Party Secretary Chen Yiming visited Song Qiankun, Song Xiaofan returned home. Her cousin Yan Bei came with her. Yan Bei had visited Uncle Song Qiankun's home in Dongjiang only once as a child, accompanying her father. During her last visit to Phoenix Island with her husband Ba Dong, they had been too rushed to visit her uncle, something that had bothered her since. Now, attending the public listing celebration of the popular art Media Group provided a perfect opportunity to make up for that oversight. However, she wasn't coming purely to visit her uncle. She carried a special mission from her brother Hong Tai Hong. Originally, Ba Dong was supposed to accompany her to Dongjiang. Still, he had gone to America with Bai Wen, the China regional director of Duku Company, to sign a cooperation agreement. Bai Wen was cousin Song Xiaofan's husband. Before departing, Hong Tai Hong had specifically called Yan Bei, asking her to use this opportunity to visit Uncle Song Qiankun. He had sent over numerous expensive gifts, ginseng, bird's nest, and lingji mushrooms, all presents he had received from others. Yan Bei knew her brother's sudden show of filial respect toward their uncle had ulterior motives. In recent years, Hurricane Investment, effectively controlled by Hong Tai Hong, had participated in Duku Company's strategic restructuring and acquisition of several Chinese state-owned enterprises, with Donggang being a key project. If successful, Hurricane Investment would not only profit, but also become an important partner in Duku Company's new Marshall Plan for China. Everything from the cooperation framework to specific details had reached a preliminary agreement, just awaiting formal signatures to complete the deal. But right at this moment, Donggang experienced a worker protest incident, resulting in the death of a Duku Company representative. To quickly mitigate the negative impact on the project, Duku Company's China regional director, Bai Wen, personally went to Dongjiang. Through negotiations, the situation was nearly resolved. At this critical juncture, Hong Tai Hong learned from high-level sources that the Central Committee would appoint a new party secretary from another region. While he had initially worried that leadership changes in the Dongjiang Provincial Committee might affect the Donggang project, he was delighted to discover that the new secretary was none other than Chen Yiming, his old comrade from their difficult days in northern wilderness. To be safe, Hong Tai Hong called Chen Yiming and directly requested his support for the Donggang project. Perhaps because phone conversations were inconvenient, Chen's response was ambiguous, without making any clear commitment. Hong Tai Hong wasn't particularly concerned. Given Chen's current position, he naturally couldn't speak or act as casually as ordinary people. Still, Hong Tai Hong felt somewhat uneasy. After all, Chen Yiming had been working in other regions for years. They rarely met, and their relationship had gradually grown distant, no longer as close as before. Soon after, hearing that Chen was in Beijing, Hong Tai Hong called to arrange a meeting, but Chen declined, citing time constraints. This gave him a bad feeling. Sure enough, news soon came from Dongjiang that immediately upon taking office, Chen Yiming had directly intervened in the Donggang workers' incident, temporarily halting the acquisition project. Yan Bei had learned all this from her husband, Ba Dong. Over the years, although Ba Dong was nominally the CEO of Hurricane Investment, her brother Hong Tai-hung had always been the true strategist behind the scenes. From Hurricane Investment's gradual acquisition of assets to the current public listing of the popular art Muhdia Group and Duku Company's acquisition of Donggang, Ba Dong had faithfully executed all of Hong Tai-hung's decisions. In a sense, Ba Dong was merely Hong Tai-hung's white glove. As a wife, Yanbei felt some sympathy for her husband, but when she considered that not only Ba Dong but even their marriage had been just another piece in her brother's grand chess game, she felt helpless. Fortunately, although she was listed as a Hurricane Investment shareholder, she wasn't directly involved in company operations, spared from being ordered around by her brother like her husband was. After finding the TV drama production center's work too complicated, she recently transferred to the Literature and History Publishing House as an editor. Besides reviewing manuscripts, she had no other concerns. She felt this carefree work better suited her temperament. Originally, Yanbei hadn't planned to attend the popular art Muhdia Group's stock listing celebration. She was particularly uncomfortable with her brother's special mission, which made her feel like a spy. However, thinking about not having seen Chen Yimeng for years stirred the emotions buried in her heart like sediment at the bottom of a river. Since her last visit to Phoenix Island with Ba Dong, Yanbei had been taking the medicine prescribed by Master Wu but hadn't seen any results yet. She hoped to use this opportunity to consult with Master Wu. Additionally, after transferring to the publishing house, she had received a manuscript that had been sitting there for some time, inexplicably unreviewed. Titled The Biography of Zhang Da, it was written by Wang Sheng. Yanbei vaguely remembered meeting him during her last visit to Phoenix Island, a deputy editor-in-chief at Popular Art Muhdia. She found the manuscript good but was uncertain about some historical facts, especially portions involving Uncle Song Chengkun. She had written to Wang Sheng but received no response. She hoped to find the author during this trip to Dongjiang for a face-to-face discussion. A few days ago, Du Wei, the chairman of Popular Art Muhdia Group, called her and Ba Dong to say that the artist's village on Phoenix Island was complete. Their villa was right beside Niangzhu Lake, facing south with a beautiful northern backdrop. Yanbei wanted to take this opportunity to see it. Like last time, the Popular Art stock listing celebration was held grandly at the Phoenix Island Resort Hotel. As special guests, Yanbei and Song Xiaofan stayed in the hotel's VIP building, and their rooms were adjacent. On the day they checked in, before the celebration officially began, the two cousins decided to explore the island after dinner. Although Yanbei had visited Phoenix Island once before, Song Xiaofan was ultimately a local and knew the island well enough to serve as a guide. However, Phoenix Island had undergone such dramatic changes since Song Xiaofan's days as a sent-down youth that when she led Yanbei around the island, she almost couldn't find their way back to the hotel. When they returned to the hotel, at the elevator, they saw Du Wei accompanying a lavishly dressed middle-aged woman with a distinct celebrity air entering the elevator. As Song Xiaofan was about to follow them in, Yanbei, walking behind her, quietly tugged at her sleeve. Song Xiaofan paused, and after the elevator started moving, Yanbei said mysteriously in a low voice, "Did you recognize who that was with Du Wei?" Song Xiaofan looked puzzled. "Who?" "Xiao Xiao," Yanbei pronounced the unfamiliar name. "The famous soprano." Song Xiaofan, having spent many years in America and only recently returned to China, wasn't familiar with domestic celebrities and merely responded with a mild, "Oh." But Yanbei's next words startled her. "Xiao Xiao has another identity. She's Chen Yimeng's current wife." When Yanbei said this, her expression was complex. Song Xiaofan knew about her cousin's past crush on Chen Yimeng and could understand her subtle emotions. Chen Yimeng was now the newly appointed provincial party secretary of Dongjiang, and Du Wei had already invited his wife to attend. Recalling her recent visit to Donggang with her husband Bai Wen, Song Xiaofan thought to herself that this celebration must be more significant than it appeared. After returning to their rooms, Yanbei's mind kept reverting to Xiao Xiao's image. She had planned to call Chen Yiming after returning to her room, but Xiao Xiao's unexpected appearance had disrupted her plans. Judging from Du Wei's servile manner following Xiao Xiao, they clearly had some scheme in mind. Her brother, Hong Tai-hang, must have known about this. Du Wei's ability to invite Xiao Xiao likely resulted from her brother's behind-the-scenes maneuvering, yet he had kept it from her. Yanbei felt momentarily angry, but despite her anger, she still had to complete her brother's assigned task. She reasoned that as provincial party secretary, Chen Yiming would likely attend tomorrow's celebration. Perhaps she could find an opportunity to meet him then. However, Yanbei hadn't anticipated that at the next day's celebration. At the same time, Provincial Governor Luo Baochang and Propaganda Department head Lang Tao attended. Provincial Party Secretary Chen Yiming was nowhere to be seen. This wasn't the only surprise for Yanbei. When she and her cousin Song Xiaofan went to Wu Shrine to see Master Wu, the security guard informed them that Master Wu was in closed-door meditation, not receiving any practitioners or patients. Yanbei asked the guard, "When did the master begin his meditation retreat?" The guard replied, "Almost a year ago." Yanbei wanted to ask more, but Song Xiaofan stopped her. When Yanbei asked why, Song Xiaofan avoided answering, seeming mysteriously reticent. Only upon returning to the hotel did Song Xiaofan tell Yanbei that Master Wu had recently encountered trouble. Someone had exposed online that he had several illegitimate children on Phoenix Island. The whistleblower was Du Wei's subordinate, a deputy editor-in-chief at popular art media group named Wang Sheng. Master Wu had sued him for defamation, resulting in Wang Sheng receiving a 3-year sentence. The case caused quite an uproar online at the time. Haven't you heard about it? Upon hearing this, Yanbei suddenly remembered the biography of Zhang Da and was left speechless and shocked. 3. Mid-Autumn Festival Confusion. The Song household, usually quiet, suddenly became lively. First, the new provincial party secretary, Chen Yiming, personally visited Song Qiankun, and now his daughter Song Xiaofan had returned with her cousin Yanbei. This brought joy to Luo Yi's previously downcast face, worn from caring for her hospitalized husband. Coinciding with the Mid-Autumn Festival, the typically quiet house gained a festive atmosphere. After receiving her daughter's call the day before, Luo Yi went shopping with the new housekeeper, Little Wu, and bought enough to stuff the refrigerator as if preparing for the new year. Daughter Song Xiaofan had visited during the Spring Festival with her husband Bai Wen, but cousin Yanbei was a rare guest who hadn't visited for many years. Luo Yi, who rarely entered the kitchen, prepared a mid-autumn feast even more lavish than a New Year's dinner to show her enthusiasm that evening. Watching her mother bustling about with renewed vitality, Song Xiaofan seemed listless. Faced with the table full of dishes, she found herself without appetite. This wasn't because her mother's cooking was poor, but because she truly had no appetite. Purely to accompany cousin Yanbei, she forced herself to drink half a glass of wine, then used the excuse of taking food to her father to collect small portions of each dish on a plate and carry it upstairs. Since her father's discharge from the hospital, his body hadn't fully recovered, and walking was difficult. Her mother would arrange food on a plate to take upstairs each mealtime. Song Xiaofan had originally planned to return to America with her husband, Bai Wen. Her newly published novel, To the 80s, had been acquired by the renowned Random House, and she'd hoped to discuss translation issues with the publisher while accompanying her husband to America. Earlier, she had declined Du Wei's invitation to attend Popular Art Media Group's stock listing celebration, but Bai Wen had suddenly suggested she attend. "Didn't they say the villas are completed? You could take your mother to see the house." Bai Wen's reasoning seemed forced, and Song Xiaofan hesitated. But when she heard about her father's illness, she chose to return to Dongjiang without hesitation. In the days since returning to Dongjiang from Beijing, Song Xiaofan had been unsettled. When Yanbei told her at the Phoenix Island Resort Hotel's elevator the night before last that the singer Xiao Xiao accompanying Du Wei was the new provincial party secretary Chen Yiming's current wife, her mind suddenly cleared. She recalled a text message she'd accidentally seen from cousin Hong Tai-hung to her husband Bai Wen. New secretary halted project upon taking office, planning to send Yan Bei to Dongjiang to see him. Have Xiaofan return to Dongjiang, ask uncle to intervene. The message was telegram-like, concise and ambiguous, with abrupt transitions that confused Song Xiaofan. But now, hearing Yan Bei's words and thinking back to her recent inspection visit to Donggang with her husband, she seemed to understand something. It appeared that, like her cousin, she too had become a pawn in her cousin's and husband's ongoing new Marshall Plan. At this thought, her body trembled involuntarily, nearly dropping the plate. As Song Xiaofan entered the upstairs room, she saw her father reclining on a couch that resembled a single bed. His sparse white hair lay scattered like messy straw, and a broken pair of reading glasses hung from his chest by a piece of yarn. His head drooped as if he were sleeping. Looking at this scene, Song Xiaofan felt her father had aged considerably since her last visit home. Not only had his energy and eyesight deteriorated significantly, but his memory and thinking had also declined. Sometimes, he would suddenly doze off mid-conversation, with saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. Now, as Song Xiaofan watched her seemingly sleeping father, hesitating whether to wake him for dinner, she saw him shudder, startled awake by something. He suddenly opened his eyes and stared blankly at his daughter standing before him, as if not recognizing her. Only when Song Xiaofan called out "Papa" did he respond with an "Oh," wiping the drool from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand, muttering, "I just had a dream. I dreamed of your grandfather." Song Xiaofan was surprised. Her father rarely mentioned her grandfather for as long as she could remember. Even in his memoirs, he had only briefly touched upon the episode where he had led the Red Army guerrillas into Pai Town to shoot her grandfather Huang Yaozu. This was probably the most legendary and controversial experience in her father's long and winding life. What puzzled her was that the older her father got, the more reluctant he became to mention this incident. Now, seeing tears glimmer in her father's clouded eyes as he mentioned dreaming of grandfather, she felt a wave of unease. Only then did Song Qiankun notice the plate in his daughter's hands. "Dinner time?" he said, trying to sit up from the sofa, but he couldn't manage it after several attempts. Song Xiaofan quickly put the plate on the nearby tea table and went to help her father. After he was settled, she brought the plate back. At first, she wanted to let him eat alone, but his hands shook so severely he couldn't hold the chopsticks. When he finally managed to pick up some food, it fell to the floor before reaching his mouth. She had to switch to feeding him with a spoon, but after just a few bites, he refused to eat more. Watching her father stubbornly close his mouth and turn his head away like a child, Song Xiaofan had no choice but to put down the spoon. "Why didn't Bai Wen come back with you this time?" Song Xiaofan heard an aged voice near her ear. She was stunned for a moment before realizing it was her father's voice. Looking up, she found her father still had his eyes closed, as if asleep. She thought she had misheard, but no one else was in the room. "Did he send you back here? Is it still about the Donggang matter?" Song Xiaofan clearly saw her father's dry lips moving. The voice was definitely coming from him. This made her realize that her father wasn't as memory-impaired, slow-thinking, and decrepit as she had imagined, but still maintained a clear mind. She didn't know how to answer and hesitated when she heard her father say, "No new of you understand this person, nor are you his match." The voice was somewhat muffled, as if squeezed from his throat. Song Xiaofan stared at her father blankly, trying to decipher his meaning, but it felt like facing a tangled mess with no clear thread to follow. "Yan Bei, what is she here for?" Song Xiaofan heard her father ask, his voice carrying unconcealed suspicion. "Yan Bei said she hadn't seen you for many years. She came to visit." Before she could finish, her father shook his head, a mocking smile appearing on his face. "She's not here to see me. She has another mission." Song Xiaofan was rendered speechless. Her father wasn't confused at all. Nothing could be hidden from him. As if to hide something, she turned around. She saw the tea table beside the sofa in disarray, piled with books and journals, with a magnifying glass nearby, the one she had bought from Beijing after hearing from her mother about her father's rapidly declining eyesight. Apparently, her father had continued reading during his illness. As she went to organize the messily stacked books, she suddenly noticed among them not only the familiar Song Qiangkun's memoirs, but also a manuscript titled The Biography of Zhang Da. Though Song Xiaofan didn't know the specific contents of this manuscript, it wasn't unfamiliar to her. The author was Wang Sheng, the same person who had exposed Master Wu online. Over a year ago, this biography of Zhang Da had angered her father so much that he was hospitalized. She later learned that the book revealed many secrets about her father's underground work in Dajiang before liberation, including details about his alleged betrayal of party secrets and so-called defection to the enemy. Although Biography of Zhang Da was never published, it had deeply affected her father, taking him a long time to recover. Song Xiaofan had thought her father had forgotten about this manuscript, but now she realized she was wrong. Looking at the open manuscript on the tea table, she suddenly remembered the phone call she had received from Cheng Guojun recently. They hadn't contacted each other since their last meeting at the White Rose Hotel. When she suddenly received Cheng Guojun's call, she thought it was about his son-in-law's matter and felt troubled, but he said, "There's something that, after much thought, I feel I should tell you." Hearing Cheng Guojun's hesitant tone, Song Xiaofan grew curious and asked what it was. He hesitated before saying, "Luo Zheng is dead." When Song Xiaofan heard this name, her mind jolted. Luo Zheng was the person who had accused her father of betraying party secrets and defecting to the enemy. For decades, he had pursued her father like a gadfly, causing her father to tremble at the mere mention of his name. During the Cultural Revolution, Song Xiaofan once believed her father was truly a traitor, simply because she believed in this man's big character posters. Now that this man was finally dead, Song Xiaofan suddenly felt relieved. The shadow that had hung over her father's heart for so many years could finally dissipate. This was good news for their entire family. On his deathbed, Luo Zheng entrusted the bookstore to my care, though only temporarily, Cheng Guojun said on the phone. What bookstore? The former underground liaison station. Your father knows about it? Cheng Guojun said something more, but Song Xiaofan was distracted and didn't catch it clearly, thinking about telling her father this news. Now, seeing her father still seemingly under the shadow of that manuscript, she felt sad. Whatever happened, she couldn't let her father remain in Luo Zheng's shadow at the end of his life. Perhaps news of this man's death could lighten the burden that had long weighed on her father's heart. With this thought, she leaned close to her father's ear and said softly, "Papa, I have news for you. Luo Zheng is dead." Though Song Xiaofan's voice was quiet, it struck Song Qiangkun like a thunderbolt, making his ears ring. He seemed not to believe it and asked again, "You said, who died?" Song Xiaofan raised her voice and repeated it against Song Qiangkun's ear. She also repeated what Cheng Guojun had told her, but Song Qiangkun seemed not to hear. He stared fixedly at some point, his face showing a delirious expression as he muttered repeatedly, "Bookstore liaison station." Just then, Luo Yi and Yan Bei came upstairs after finishing dinner. Song Xiaofan saw her mother carrying a bowl of ginseng and white fungus soup, while Yan Bei held an exquisite mooncake box, gifts specially brought for her father. After returning home from the hospital, Song Qiangkun would have a bowl of ginseng and white fungus soup after dinner each day for better nutrition. His hands trembled too severely to drink by himself, so his wife Luo Yi and the housekeeper Xiao Wu took turns feeding him. At this moment, Luo Yi came to his side and, noticing the substantial amount left in the bowl, remarked, "Why have you eaten so little?" Song Xiaofan, sitting nearby, gestured with her lips and said, "Let me feed him." She took the small bowl of ginseng and white fungus soup from her mother's hands. After testing a small spoonful to check the right temperature, she brought it to her father's lips. But Song Qian-kun closed his eyes, turned his head aside, and faced away. Seeing Song Qian-kun's unusual expression, Luo Yi knew the father and daughter must have discussed something that had upset him. Since his illness, Song Qian-kun's emotions had been unstable, his moods mercurial, often getting angry for no apparent reason. Like coaxing a child, she turned his drooping head back and said, "Old Song, today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Yan Bei brought you mooncakes specially from Beijing. Why don't you try some?" Hearing this, Yan Bei lifted the lid and respectfully presented the mooncake box to Song Qian-kun, saying, "Uncle, you and my father always loved Furatang's mooncakes the best. My brother bought these for you from Furatang. They have rock sugar inside, just like the ones we ate when we were little." The lingji mushroom in today's white fungus soup was also a gift from Yan Bei and Tai Hong, Luo Yi added. Perhaps Yan Bei's words, or perhaps out of courtesy, stirred memories of his brother-in-law Hong Hu, who had passed away several years ago. Song Qian-kun opened his eyes and took a small sip of the soup, turning his face toward Yan Bei, staring at her blankly as if unable to recognize his niece. "Who are you?" "Old Song, this is Yan Bei," said Luo Yi. "Tai Hang bought you Furutang mooncakes. Please try a bite." She picked out a small mooncake from the box, peeled off the wrapping paper, broke off a piece, and brought it to Song Qian-kun's lips. But he turned his head away, continuing to stare at Yan Bei. "Did Tai Hang send you here?" Yan Bei was momentarily lost for words. Song Xiaofan, having heard her father ask this question earlier, stepped in. "Dad, besides visiting you and Mom, Yan Bei came to Dongjiang to find Master Wu. Last time at Phoenix Island, Master Wu gave Yan Bei some medicine pills, saying she would be able to conceive after taking them. But it's been so long, and there's been no sign." Luo Yi let out an interested, "Oh?" and asked Yan Bei, "Have you met Master Wu this time?" Yan Bei seemed somewhat embarrassed and gave an evasive answer. "Not yet. We went to the Wugong Shrine, but Master Wu wouldn't see anyone, saying he was in seclusion for cultivation. Since that lawsuit, Master Wu has rarely made public appearances." Song Xiaofan glanced at her father and suddenly remembered something. "Oh, right, Dad. Last time when you went to Phoenix Island, you two talked for quite a while. What did you discuss? What do you really think of Master Wu?" But Song Qian-kun kept his eyes closed, as if he hadn't heard. Seeing this, Luo Yi said softly, "Let your father rest." She went to the bedroom to get a blanket, draped it over Song Qian-kun's chest, then quietly left the room with Song Xiaofan and Yan Bei. But Song Qian-kun wasn't asleep. As the footsteps faded away, he was alone again in the room. An autumn breeze blew in through the partially closed window, heavy with the season's melancholy. Feeling a chill, he pulled the blanket higher on his chest. His mind alternated between confusion and clarity, like walking in dense fog, misty before his eyes, yet crystal clear in his heart. "Dad, last time when you went to Phoenix Island, what did you two talk about for so long?" His daughter's voice echoed in his mind. "What do you really think of Master Wu? Yes, what kind of person was he indeed? From the moment I met Wu Bozhong, I found him dishonest. He claimed to be around my age and said he had treated Song Meiling and served as a military doctor for both the Kuomintang and Liberation Army. But by my reckoning, he was at least a generation younger than me, and his claim about treating Song Meiling was clearly fabricated. He even got the unit numbers of both the Kuomintang and Liberation Army wrong. However, he wasn't entirely an unlearned charlatan. He did have considerable knowledge of the I Ching and the Yellow Emperor's internal classic. His supposedly mystical ultimate origin kung fu was merely a repackaging that combined the essence of the internal classic with qigong. What surprised me most was that he had read quite a bit of Marx. That day, he unexpectedly launched into a discourse about capital, saying, "I've carefully studied the discussion of primitive accumulation in Volume 1 of Capital and discovered the feasible and inevitable path for capitalism to restore itself within socialist society." It's like a small worm eating out the inside of a chrysalis before emerging from the cocoon. Such a large chrysalis is no match for the tiny worm and can only watch helplessly as it's consumed. The plow of primitive capitalist accumulation must thoroughly turn over the fertile soil of the socialist economy. When the tightly bound barrel loosens, all rigid restrictions will relax and the frozen river will thaw. Perhaps then we'll see open bribery, decadence, unbridled desires, prostitutes everywhere, thieves running rampant, even division and separatism. But the spring and autumn period was the freest. The 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period was the freest. All periods of warlord warfare were the freest, most conducive to producing free people and free culture. In this sense, Old China was actually the best China. In Old China, my father wore silk clothes and French designer brands, and I had unlimited possibilities for development. Back then, Runftu was Runftu, and Brother Xun was Brother Xun. Note, referring to Lu Xun and a character from his works. Runftu had to call Brother Xun master. Even though Brother Xun had egalitarian thoughts, that was just his personal virtue and utopian thinking. People can never be truly equal. How could an illiterate Runftu sit as an equal with Brother Xun? In a free society, people earn their living by their own abilities, without so much struggle. You betrayed your own family back then, killed your own father in the name of righteousness, joined the revolution thinking you could realize that ethereal communism, and followed that party's tumultuous path for decades. But today, how many people still believe in all that? Actually, social development is like a pendulum. So-called revolution and counter-revolution are relative terms, with no absolute right or wrong. Everything depends on timing and momentum. When society only needs one measure of revolution, you can only give it one measure. But you gave it 10 measures at once, or maintained that one measure for too long. That's excess, that's exhaustion. As a result, people inevitably become weary of and react against revolution. Those who were criticized and expelled by the revolution will make a comeback. Revolution turns into its opposite, becoming non-revolution or counter-revolution. Someday in the future, this non-revolution or counter-revolution will likely also exhaust itself. History thus moves back and forth, swinging like a pendulum, left, then right. We're now in the phase where the pendulum is swinging back. As individuals, we can't fight against this momentum. We can only go with the flow. Wu Bozhong spoke like a university professor giving a lecture, not at all like a master who had spent nearly a lifetime wandering as an itinerant practitioner. In the past, these words alone would have been enough to label him a counter-revolutionary, but now I found his arguments compelling, unable to find any grounds for refutation. Some years ago, the Huang clan from my hometown, Pai Town, invited me back for the unveiling ceremony of their restored ancestral hall. I saw my father, Huang Yaoju's memorial tablet prominently displayed in the ancestral temple where they worshipped their forebears. For a long time before that, my father, that reactionary Kuomintang militia leader, had his tombstone destroyed by our own clan members. Standing before his tablet, I recalled the scene from years ago when I led the Red Army guerrillas back to Pai Town, captured my father in the Huang family mansion, and had him executed. This had been my proof of loyalty to the revolution. But now, seeing my father's tablet restored to the ancestral hall, I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. This plunged me into deep confusion. That day, Wu Bozhong's grand discourse was clearly meant to justify some of his own actions, but it inadvertently resolved my inner turmoil. But how could I explain this to my daughter? Song Qiangkun suddenly felt a wave of bitterness in his heart. Most of his life experiences had been written into the memoir before him, but some things were left out, not because he didn't dare or want to write them, but because he wasn't certain about them. Yet his silence didn't mean others wouldn't write about these things, like this biography of Zhang Da lying before him, which wrote not only about Zhang Da but also about me. But was it really pure fabrication? Song Qiankun thought to himself that Chinese people believe that final judgment comes only after death, and now it was time for his own final judgment. He opened his clouded old eyes, his gaze falling on the open manuscript before him, and remained fixed there for a long while. 4. Closing. Early the next morning, Du Wei drove to pick up Song Xiaofan, Hong Yanbei, and Luo Yi to view villas at Phoenix Island Art Village, leaving only Song Qiankun and the housekeeper Xiao Wu at home. Usually, Song Qiankun wouldn't rise until after 10, but today, shortly after Luo Yi left with his daughter and niece, he got up. Since leaving the hospital, his severe hand tremors meant Luo Yi had been helping him wash and dress. This morning, before leaving, she had asked Xiao Wu to look after him. When Xiao Wu came upstairs with breakfast, she found Song Qiankun already dressed neatly, sitting in his study-cum-office. "Mr. Song, your hands aren't shaking anymore?" Xiao Wu was astonished. Song Qiankun neither nodded nor shook his head, only asking Xiao Wu to bring his breakfast. She hurried downstairs to fetch it and tried to feed him, but he waved her away. "I'll do it myself," he mumbled, taking the spoon from her hands. Song Qiankun drank a small bowl of white fungus soup and ate a boiled egg, more than his usual single bowl of soup. Xiao Wu noticed that his condition seemed to have much improved. After breakfast, Song Qiankun told Xiao Wu, "Come with me for a walk." Since his hospital discharge, Song Qiankun had stayed home without stepping outside once. Xiao Wu thought he must be feeling cooped up and wanted some fresh air, so she said, "All right, I'll tidy up the kitchen and then accompany you to the courtyard." But Song Qiankun replied, "I want to visit an old friend. Call me a car." Xiao Wu felt uneasy seeing Song Qiankun dressed so formally, as if attending a social visit or meeting. The provincial party committee office assigned her to care for Song Qiankun, and though she was in her 40s, the Song family still called her Little Wu. Besides his daily care, she was also responsible for his safety. With Luo Yi away and Song Qiankun wanting to go out, she didn't dare make the decision alone. "Mr. Song, let me call Mrs. Luo." But before she could finish, Song Qiankun cut in. "What's there to call her about? Have I lost even this small freedom?" Xiao Wu didn't dare insist further. According to protocol, Song Qiankun's transportation was supposed to be arranged by the provincial party committee office. She could only say, "All right, I'll request a car from the office." But Song Qiankun frowned and said, "Wait for an office car? That'll take forever. Just call a taxi. Taxis are faster." Seeing Song Qiankun's resolute tone, Xiao Wu had no choice but to agree. Soon the taxi arrived. Before getting in, Xiao Wu secretly texted Luo Yi behind Song Qiankun's back. "Mrs. Luo, I'm accompanying Mr. Song to visit a friend." After leaving No. 1 South Lake Road, the driver followed Song Qiankun's directions through half the city. Xiao Wu, being from out of town and relatively new to Dazhang, couldn't get her bearings in the car. Worried the driver might be taking a roundabout route, she couldn't help asking, "Mr. Song, where are we going?" But Song Qiankun remained silent, as if asleep. After driving for an unknown time, the taxi finally stopped by the roadside. Xiao Wu looked out the window and saw a dilapidated 2-story wooden building nearby that appeared to be a bookstore. The corrugated roof was overgrown with dusty weeds, and the signboard above the doorway had split in two. Its characters were so weathered by wind and rain that they were barely legible, making the store's name unrecognizable. "Is this it?" Xiao Wu asked, unclear whether she was addressing the driver or Song Qiankun. "Yes, this is the People's Bookstore." The driver pointed at the wooden building and pressed the meter. Xiao Wu looked at the displayed fare and was about to pay when Song Qiankun suddenly grabbed her hand, mumbling, "Let's just look from the car." Song Qiankun asked Xiao Wu to roll down the window. Through it, he gazed at the 2-story wooden building, its blackened roof tiles, the dusty weeds growing on them, and the split signboard above the entrance where only the characters P and store remained visible. "Yes, the People's Bookstore. This is the place," Song Qiankun murmured. His vision blurred as he seemed to travel back more than half a century when he led the Dajiang Underground Committee's work as the chief editor of the Dajiang Daily, the secret radio station responsible for liaising with the Dongjiang Provincial Committee was located here. The liaison station's leader was Liu Jiming. This wooden building was his home. After the Japanese army occupied Dajiang, Liu Jiming's parents died in a bombing while fleeing. Soon after, Liu Jiming joined the new Fourth Army, and following the victory in the anti-Japanese war, he secretly returned to Dajiang under the party's arrangements to lead the liaison station, using the cover identity of the People's Bookstore owner. Previously in the new Fourth Army and Dongjiang Provincial Committee, he had been Liu Jiming's superior, and now Liu Jiming worked directly under him again. Their relationship was clearly more intimate and trusting than ordinary comrades. But Song Qiankun could never have predicted that later events would turn Liu Jiming into his bitter enemy, haunting him like a ghost for the rest of his life. Everything started with the secret liaison station being compromised by special agents, Song Qiankun thought. That day, according to plan, he was heading from the Dajiang Daily office on Rouge Road to the People's Bookstore just across the street to chair an underground committee meeting. But just as he reached the opposite side and was about to cross to the bookstore, a squad of armed Kuomintang military police suddenly appeared from nowhere, surrounding the store. Immediately, intense gunfire broke out. Shortly after the shooting stopped, several agents emerged from the store dragging Liu Jiming while carrying out a corpse. He recognized it as Little He, the radio operator. Witnessing this scene, he felt an unprecedented sense of danger. Instead of returning to the newspaper office, he hid in a nearby hotel, hoping to lay low temporarily before finding a way to contact other comrades and learn how the underground party had been compromised. But that night, the same group of Kuomintang agents broke down the door and burst into his hotel room, taking him away. After his arrest, he was held in a secret military statistics bureau detention center in Dajiang and wasn't interrogated for several days. When he finally entered the interrogation room and saw Bai Shouhu's rat-like face, he seemed to understand something, though he still clung to false hope. Bai Shouhu appeared to see through his thoughts. After dismissing everyone else, leaving just the two in the room, he chuckled and said, "Mr. Song, oh no, Mr. Huang, my apologies for frightening you." He had never liked this military statistics bureau major general he'd dealt with since the anti-Japanese war, but the man had stuck to him like a leech, impossible to shake off. This man had already been watching him when he first arrived in Dajiang from the Niangzhu Lake liberated area over a year ago. Now he felt like a fish caught in the other's net. "Thanks to Mr. Huang, our operation a few days ago completely wiped out your party's underground organization in Dajiang," Bai Shouhu said, lighting a cigar and puffing. "What does that have to do with me?" he shot back with an annoyed glance. "Don't be so modest, Mr. Huang." Bai Shouhu chuckled. "From the day you took office in Dajiang, your every move has been under our watch. From passing intelligence through your articles in the Dajiang Daily to the liaison station and secret radio at the People's Bookstore. Even that radio operator Little He was our military statistics bureau agent planted inside. His death in the operation was to protect you, to protect the entire Trojan horse plan." Bai Shouhu's words filled him with deep unease. "Protect me?" Bai Shouhu flicked his cigar ash, smiling coldly. "Yes, Mr. Huang. You should know that not only did we successfully uncover the Dajiang underground organization by tracking your movements, but through the telegram you sent from the liaison station 2 days ago, we also located the Dongjiang Provincial Committee's secret location. We wiped out both their office and military hospital hidden on Phoenix Island in one strike. We had no choice but to sacrifice Little He to avoid suspicion falling on you. Don't worry, no one will suspect you leaked the organization's secrets." He felt his scalp tingling as if being dragged down a cliff. He waved his hand as if swatting flies and shouted, "Nonsense! I never sold out any intelligence. Why are you framing me like this?" But Bai Shouhu just smiled without answering, his face bearing an inscrutable expression. Now, gazing through the car window at that two-story wooden building, Song Qiankun seemed to hear his conversation with Bai Shouhu from years ago. The decades of repeated investigations triggered by Luo Zheng's reports flashed through his mind. He couldn't forget Luo Zheng's face, twisted with grief and anger, as he denounced and accused him before thousands during the Cultural Revolution. "I swore to Bai Shui that I would find the traitor who betrayed her and the Dongjiang Provincial Committee. Song Qiankun, do you dare deny before the masses that you are that traitor?" He remembered wanting to answer, "I didn't. It wasn't me." But a cold voice echoed in his ear. "If not you, then who?" He was struck speechless, involuntarily shuddering. "I didn't. It wasn't me," Song Qiankun moaned as if in a dream. Sitting beside him, Xiao Wu looked at him, puzzled. "Mr. Song, what did you say?" He mumbled evasively, his gaze still fixed on the two-story wooden building. Just then, someone around 50 years old, wearing a black armband, walked out of the bookstore, seemingly the store owner or an employee. The person carried a garbage bag and glanced up at the taxi parked by the roadside, placing it by the main door before turning back into the store. Xiao Wu suddenly said, as if discovering something, "That person's wearing a black armband. Someone in their family must have died." "Yes, he died," Song Qiankun mumbled in agreement, feeling a wave of relief and a sense of emptiness. Xiao Wu found his words puzzling and asked curiously, "Mr. Song, did you want to buy books? I can accompany you into the store." "There's no need to go in," Song Qiankun said with a sigh, drawing back his gaze and weakly waving his hand. "Let's go back." So the taxi carried Song Qiankun and Xiao Wu back along the same route to No. 1 South Lake Road. After the cab stopped at the Song family villa's entrance and Xiao Wu paid the fare, she was about to help Song Qiankun out of the car when she noticed him leaning back in his seat, his head tilted to one side, with white foam trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Mr. Song, we're home. Let's get out." She called twice with no response. Panicked, she held her hand under Song Qiankun's nose. There was no breath. She touched his forehead. It was ice cold. She screamed in alarm. 5. Storm is coming. About a year later, one day, Provincial Party Secretary Chen Yiming noticed a brief cultural news item in the lower left corner of that day's Dongjiang Daily's front page. News report: Phoenix Island Art Village has officially begun welcoming guests. The Art Village is an experimental art creation base established by our province, jointly funded by the Popular Art Muhdia Group Corporation and the Niangzhou Lake District People's Government. According to reports, Phoenix Island Art Village has invited renowned artists from across the country, offering tax-free incentives and the opportunity to purchase a villa at a discounted price as a studio upon residency. The first batch of residents includes notable female author Ms. Song Xiaofan, famous director Xie Lu, and celebrated actress Xiao Yanzi. Furthermore, according to Du Wei, chairman of Popular Art Muhdia Group, the second batch of resident artists has been tentatively confirmed, with renowned female singer Xiao Xiao among them. Chen Yimeng's eyes were fixed, unmoving on the characters Xiao Xiao, his eyebrows furrowing like silkworms. His first instinct was to call his wife immediately to ask what was going on. But just as he took out his phone, he remembered she was still abroad for a performance. He changed his mind and called his secretary, Hu Shangyang, into the office, instructing him to request detailed materials about the Popular Art Muhdia Group and Phoenix Island Art Village from the propaganda department. After giving these instructions, he added emphatically, "Quickly, right away." "Yes, I'll notify the propaganda department immediately." Secretary Hu Shangyang, noting the provincial party secretary's serious expression, responded and hurried toward the office door. At the threshold, he remembered a document in his hand and turned back, presenting it with both hands to Chen Yimeng's desk. "This is a request report just forwarded from the general office." Chen Yimeng looked at the document. It was a request from the Political and Legal Affairs Commission to convene the Dongjiang Province Law Society Representatives Conference. Both Governor Luo Baochang and the Secretary of the Political and Legal Affairs Commission had already added their comments. His gaze lingered on the secretary's comments, lost in thought.
"Would you and Governor Luo be able to attend and speak at the conference?" Hu Shangyang asked.
He pondered for a moment before asking, "For previous Law Society meetings, did the party secretary or the governor attend?" Hu Shangyang hesitated before saying, "Usually the governor attends, and the secretary sends a congratulatory message, however." "However what?" "Vice President Zhuang of the Supreme Court is making a special trip from Beijing to attend this conference. He used to be the president of our provincial high court." While overseeing Chen Yimeng's expression, Hu Shangyang explained, "According to convention, you should attend. Where did all these conventions come from?" Chen Yimeng said dismissively, "Let's do this. Ask Governor Luo to attend, and I'll write a congratulatory message." With that, he shifted his gaze away from the request report. After Hu Shangyang left, Chen Yimeng sat alone in his office and opened the Dongjiang Daily again, staring at the words "renowned female singer Xiao Xiao" in the news brief. He felt an uneasy feeling that a storm was brewing. Chapter 5, 1. A Date in the Last Century. When Gu Zhang received the notice to attend the member representative conference of the Dongjiang Provincial Law Society, she was a little surprised. In fact, she was also surprised that she became a member of the Provincial Law Society. At that time, she had just resigned from the Women's Rights Protection Center and had just started working as a lawyer at Junding Law Firm. Once, Huang Zupeng took her to a small gathering of the Dongda Alumni Association. Gu Zhang met Niujir at that time. In addition to Niujir, there was another person, Meng Fei. When Gu Zhang was studying at Dongjiang University, Meng Fei was the deputy director of the law department. Although he was only an associate professor, he taught well and was very graceful. Every class he taught on Introduction to Law was packed. He was more well-known in the law school than some old professors and had many fans among students. Gu Zhang was one of them. If it weren't for the sudden rumor about Meng Fei and the law department's secretary Jin, maybe. After Gu Zhang had graduated from Dongjiang University, she had never seen Meng Fei again. Seeing him suddenly at that party felt sudden and a little uncomfortable. Meng Fei was the same. His eyes subconsciously dodged momentarily when he saw Gu Zhang, but he soon became calm and composed. After all, Meng Fei was no longer the small deputy department director and associate professor. He was the dean, professor, and doctoral supervisor of the law school of Dongjiang University. He also served as the Secretary General of the Provincial Law Society and held other social positions. He became an authority in the legal community of Dongjiang Province. He was also fatter than before. In addition to maintaining his original demeanor, he also had a solemnity, sophistication, and majesty that matched his status and age, which made Gu Zhang feel a little strange. "Oh, Gu Zhang, I haven't seen you in a long time. I heard that you are a lawyer now. Great, yeah, great. We are now in the same profession." Meng Fei looked at Gu Zhang, his head slightly raised, his well-maintained fair face filled with a friendly smile. As he spoke, he introduced her to Huang Zupeng beside him. "Gu Zhang is my student. You can't mistreat her." "Of course, Gu Zhang is also my junior." Huang Zupeng nodded repeatedly with a flattering look on his face. "Old Niu, if there is any case in the future, please take care of Gu Zhang," Meng Fei said to Niujir, who was sitting on the other side. "How dare we neglect our senior students? We must pay special attention to them," Niujir said, shaking his head as if to express his opinion, and stood up to give his seat to Gu Zhang. "You two haven't seen each other for a long time. You should have a good chat. Junior sister, come over and sit with Dean Tang and Secretary Tang." Gu Zhang blushed slightly and sat in her seat without moving. Niujir was a little embarrassed. The smile on Meng Fei's face also became stiff. Huang Zupeng saw this and quickly tried to smooth things over. "Lao Niu, forget it. Gu Zhang is unlike us, who have a fellow student relationship with Dean Tang. Students tend to be more reserved in front of teachers. Don't force her." "Yes, whatever you want," Meng Fei said, his face regaining its calm and composed expression. Gu Zhang looked at the familiar yet strange face opposite her, but her heart could not calm down. She faintly smelled a man's perfume. Huang Zuping usually did not wear perfume, and Niu Jie sat beside her. The perfume must not come from him but from Tang Fei. In his 50s, he still kept the habit of wearing perfume. Gu Zheng thought. The scene of her date with Tang Fei on Jiangshan Island before graduation flashed in her mind. That morning, Gu Zheng received her dispatch certificate from the graduate assignment office on the school's first administrative building floor and prepared to return to the dormitory to pack her luggage. The next day, she reported to the Women and Children's Rights Protection Center of the Provincial Women's Federation. When she passed by the law department office building, she went to the mailroom to see if there was any mail and saw the letter. The envelope only had Gu Zheng, Class 20, Grade 20, Law Department written on it, and the writer's address was just details not available. She opened the envelope with curiosity and found a thin piece of letter paper with only one line of words on it. Gu Zheng, I invite you to have dinner with me at Yuge Restaurant on Jiangshan Island at 6:30 tonight. Tang Fei today. During her 4 years at Dongjiang University, Gu Zheng had never received a call from a member of the opposite sex, and it was her teacher who invited her to dinner alone. She looked at the 2 words Tang Fei on the letterhead, feeling nervous and flustered. Her mind quickly flashed back to the time when Deputy Director Tang asked her to come to his office for a talk, as well as the scandal between Tang Fei and Secretary Jin in the department that was widely circulated last summer. On the way back to the dormitory, Gu Zheng felt like she was on a swaying boat, blown by the strong wind, not knowing where it was heading. After lunch, she took a walk alone on campus. For the entire afternoon, the letter in her pocket was like a time bomb, making her feel uneasy. She didn't decide to keep the appointment until there was only half an hour left before the agreed time. It was already dark when Gu Zheng passed through Maple Garden and arrived at Jiangshan Island. In recent years, many restaurants and karaoke halls have opened on Jiangshan Island. Every weekend, teachers and students of Dongjiang University love to come here for dinner and entertainment. Her brother Zhong Tianyi invited guests to Jiangshan Island then, and Gu Zheng came to eat once. Because it was dark, she walked around the island before she found the small restaurant called Yuge. Yuge is a triangular wooden house. The walls and roof are all inlaid with wooden boards and painted golden with tung oil. Under the neon light, it is dazzling, like a huge gem, reminiscent of the artistic conception in Grimm's fairy tales. Gu Zheng pushed open the door and walked in. A waitress in a miniskirt came up and smiled. Hello, do you have an appointment? Yes, Gu Zheng answered after a slight hesitation. My last name is Gu. Oh, Mr. Tang's guest, I see, the waitress said with a smile before Gu Zheng finished speaking and led her into the restaurant. The restaurant was not big and had no private rooms, but each seat was separated by partitions, forming relatively independent booths. Gu Zheng followed the waitress to a seat near the inside, lifted the gauze curtain, and walked in, and immediately saw Tang Fei sitting inside. Tang Fei had obviously dressed up specially. He tightly buttoned up his short-sleeved shirt like he did when teaching students, and his hair was waxed. Orange-yellow lights shone on him, and he exuded a faint scent of perfume. Although it was not the first time Gu Zheng smelled the perfume on Tang Fei, she still couldn't help but frown. Tang Fei saw Gu Zheng come in, stood up, and said, "Ah, you're here!" His voice revealed an unconcealed joy, and he diligently let her in. His expression was not like a teacher to a student. This made Gu Zheng feel even more uneasy, and she felt she should not have come to the appointment. But now it was too late to regret. Although it was summer and the restaurant didn't have air conditioning, the room wasn't too hot because it faced the Dongjiang River, and the night breeze blew in with a cool breeze. The waitress brought 2 cold drinks and a few small cold dishes and left. Tang Fei pulled down the booth curtain and sat opposite Gu Zheng. The booth was tiny. The 2 people sat facing each other less than 3 feet apart. They could even see the acne on each other's faces clearly. Gu Zheng could even feel Tang Fei's heavy breathing. She felt very uncomfortable. Her heart was pounding and she dared not raise her eyes. Tang Fei pushed a glass of watermelon juice in front of Gu Zheng and said in a friendly tone, "It's hot. Drink some watermelon juice. Freshly squeezed, very fresh." Gu Zheng felt that Tang Fei's voice was as sweet as watermelon juice. She had never eaten alone with a man in her life. She felt sweaty all over her body, and her head was a little swollen. At this moment, she heard Tang Fei say, "Gu Zheng, I have wanted to ask you out for dinner for a long time, but I have never had the courage to do so. Since the last time we talked in the office, I have been unable to forget you. Your simple and unworldly temperament and pure beauty are always imprinted in my mind. Every time I go to class, as long as you are there, I can only see you in my eyes, as if no one else exists. I am just teaching you alone, as if only the two of us are in the world. This is the first time I have had such a feeling as a man. Really, I am not lying at all. You may. Let's talk about the relationship between my wife and me. When we were in college, many people thought we were a perfect match, but it was not the case. I never really loved her, and she never really loved me. Especially after becoming the provincial party committee secretary, she only had eyes for those leaders, serving them wholeheartedly and meticulously every day, and sometimes accompanying them on business trips, which would last for 10 days or half a month. When she was at home, she never served me like that. Once, when we reached a climax during sex, she actually shouted a man's name, "Bao Chang, Bao Chang." Since then, there has been no love between us, only the name of husband and wife. This situation has been going on for several years. I rarely go home and devote all my energy to teaching and research. I almost forgot that I was a man with 7 emotions and 6 desires until I met you, Gu Zheng. I seem to have returned to my 20s. Young people at that age were really brave. They were always infatuated and reckless once they fell in love with someone. I am like this now. You are about to leave school, and it will be too late if I don't take action. I don't want to regret it for the rest of my life." Tang Fei's eyes sparkled as he spoke, shining on Gu Zheng's face like a light. He gradually leaned forward and suddenly grabbed her hand.
Gu Zheng, I love you. I swear to God, as long as you promise me, I will divorce that bitch right away. With my status and ability, I will arrange everything for you, including your career and life after graduation. I can also take care of your brother's business." Gu Zheng shivered as if she had received an electric shock and froze in place. Looking at Tang Fei's eyes, which were as hot as those of a patient with a high fever, she couldn't help but wonder, was he like this when he was with Secretary Jin? This thought flashed through her mind, and Gu Zheng suddenly felt nauseous. She seemed to wake up from hypnosis and broke free from Tang Fei's sweaty hands. At this time, the waitress walked into the booth with a large plate of steaming food and smiled. "This is our signature dish, braised river catfish." But before she finished her words, Gu Zheng stood up from her seat and hurried out. To start his end, South Lake International Conference Center is the venue for important events and conferences held in Dongjiang Province. Both the environment and the building facilities are first class. In addition to the annual 2 sessions, major foreign affairs activities of the Provincial Party Committee and government are also held here. The 5-yearly Dongjiang Provincial Law Society Members' Congress can be arranged in the conference center, showing its high standards and the importance attached to it by the Provincial Party Committee and government leaders. In the afternoon, when Gu Zheng walked into the magnificent conference center hall and completed the registration formalities at the conference registration desk, the staff hung a badge with the words, "Attendance Certificate of the 5th Member Representative Conference of the Dongjiang Law Society," and the national emblem on her chest. She felt a sense of solemnity she had never felt before. In an instant, she thought of the small dinner many years ago. It was at that time that Tang Fei made a promise in front of his 2 junior brothers, Huang Zuping and Nu Jie, to recruit them to join the Dongjiang Law Society. "And you, Gu Zheng, join them too." He glanced at Gu Zheng and stammered, "The president is Dean Zhuang of the Provincial High Court, my teacher, and I will take care of you." He patted his chest, and because he drank too much, his face and neck turned brown.
Huang Zuping and Liu Jie raised their glasses to Tang Fei with tears in their eyes, their tongues curled, and their words were a little vague. "Thank you, Senior Brother. Thank you, Secretary General." After speaking, Huang Zuping turned to Gu Zheng and said, "Junior sister, look at how much Secretary General Tang cares about you. Why don't you toast to your teacher?" Gu Zheng said nothing, so Tang Fei patted Huang Zuping on the shoulder. "Don't force her. She has this temper, but I like it." Seeing his drunken appearance, Gu Zheng couldn't help but think of the date on Jiangshan Island that year. Gu Zheng carried a file bag containing various conference materials and walked towards building number 2, where the representatives lived. Her mind flashed back to her date with Tang Fei. Although it was a thing of the last century, she still felt her face getting a little hot when she thought of the scene at that time. Especially when she thought that her ability to join the Provincial Law Society and attend this high-level member representative conference was related to Tang Fei. She felt uneasy, as if the attendance certificate on her chest was stolen. She regretted coming to this meeting. Maybe it's not too late to leave now, Gu Zheng thought. She really wanted to run away, but at that moment someone called her from behind. "Gu Zheng!" Gu Zheng looked back and saw that it was Ling Shu, her former colleague at Junding Law Firm. Gu Zheng and Ling Shu had not seen each other since leaving Junding. At first glance, they felt a little strange to each other. Gu Zheng saw that Ling Shu was plumper than before, wearing gorgeous clothes, earrings, and jewelry, all branded, looking like a lady. "Are you married?" Gu Zheng saw a sparkling gold diamond on her ring finger and couldn't help asking, "Who is your Prince Charming?" "What about Prince Charming or Prince Dark Horse?" Ling Shu's pretty face flushed slightly, and she hesitated momentarily before saying, "Haven't you heard that I'm getting married to Liu Jie?" "Liu Jie?" Gu Zheng couldn't believe her ears. Liu Jie's greasy face and short, fat body flashed through her mind. Liu Jie divorced his wife? As soon as she said this, she realized that it was nonsense. How could Ling Shu marry him without getting a divorce? Sure enough, Ling Shu nodded and said, "Yes, Liu Jie married me the day after he and his ex-wife completed the formalities." But Gu Zheng felt that when Ling Shu said this, there was a trace of subtle melancholy on her face. She remembered the last time Ling Shu had cried to her, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. "Sister Gu, are you okay?" Ling Shu seemed to have sensed Gu Zheng's thoughts and consciously changed the subject. "I heard that you set up a legal consulting website. What was it called? Look at my memory. I can't remember it for the moment. I browsed it a few days ago."
Tonggui.com, Gu Zheng said, half politely and half sincerely. "The website has only been in operation for a short time and is still very immature. Please give us more suggestions." "How dare I give any suggestions? But Sister Gu, I really admire you for being able to create a website by yourself." Gu Zheng smiled bitterly and said, "I don't have any ability at all. I was forced to do this." Gu Zheng originally just said it casually, but it obviously reminded Ling Shui of something. A gloomy look passed over her face. "Sister Gu, don't blame me for saying something unpleasant. It was the last case that hurt you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have fallen out with Huang Zuping and the others and left Junding Law Firm." Gu Zheng listened and waited a long time before saying anything. Ling Shu said nothing more. "Sister Gu, you are here for the meeting too, right? Which room are you staying in?" Gu Zheng took out the room card she had received when she checked in and looked at it. "Room 1508. "I live in room 1506. We're next to each other," Ling Shu said happily, holding up her room card. "Let's go, but let's stay here first. We have 3 days of meetings, so we have plenty of time to chat." The two then walked towards building number 2 together. All the delegates were staying in building number 2, 1 room each. The rooms were spacious and well-equipped. There were free fruits and free cold drinks in the freezer. The large floor-to-ceiling windows faced South Lake. Once the curtains were drawn, the rippling blue water of South Lake was in full view. Gu Zheng had attended some legal conferences before and stayed in big hotels, but this was her first time staying in a hotel as high-end as the South Lake Conference Center. Seeing that it was still early for dinner,
She took a shower. While drying her hair, she heard someone knocking on the door. She opened the door and saw Ling Shu. Her face flushed. It was obvious that she had just taken a shower. When she entered the room, she said, "The hot water is really good. I just took a shower too. I heard that the shower head in the bath is imported from the United States, and the quality is really good." "Where did you hear that?" Gu Zheng asked curiously while continuing to blow-dry her hair. "Lao Niu said so. This is not his first time coming to the conference center for a meeting. I even came here to take a bath once." Ling Shu took a lychee from the fruit plate, peeled it skillfully, and put it in her mouth. "Lao Niu, Huang Zupeng, and Tang Fei all live in the VIP building. The conditions there are even better, and there are waiters who provide free massages. These gentlemen really know how to enjoy themselves." Gu Zheng always heard Ling Shuo calling him Lao Niu. It sounded like they were an old married couple instead of a newlywed couple, and she felt slightly uncomfortable. Just as she was stunned, Ling Shu suddenly said, "Do you know, Sister Gu, this time the term has changed? Tang Fei will be the vice president, and Lao Niu and Huang Zupeng will also be directors." Gu Zheng hummed nonchalantly. She had already seen Tang Fei's name on the list of conference delegates behind the president. Since that small gathering, Gu Zheng has never seen Tang Fei again, but she often sees his name in newspapers and on TV, or hears people talking about him. In the Dongjiang legal community, Tang Fei is becoming a presence that cannot be ignored. Otherwise, why would Huang Zupeng and Niu Jie try every means to get close to him? "I heard that Provincial Party Committee Secretary Chen Yiming and Provincial Governor Luo Baochang will attend the opening ceremony tomorrow." Ling Shui suddenly remembered something. "Oh, Lao Niu just called and asked us to go over to their place after dinner." As she spoke, she added, "Actually, Lao Niu has no prejudice against you. He has always treated you as his junior. When you run a website, you will inevitably have to deal with the legal community. It will do you no harm to have a good relationship with them. Besides, with Vitsuh President Tang as your supporter, you have nothing to fear." Gu Zheng frowned. Ling Shu didn't notice the expression on her face and said to herself, "Sister Gu, I heard from Lao Niu that Tang Fei liked you before. Is that true?" Hearing Ling Shu's ambiguous tone, Gu Zheng's face suddenly changed, as if she had been slapped. She pressed the still buzzing hairdryer and walked into the bathroom without saying a word. She closed the door and left Ling Shu alone in the room, letting the hairdryer continue to buzz. She stayed there for a long time. Later, she heard Ling Shu shouting outside, "Sister Gu, are you done with your hair?" She didn't respond. After a while, Ling Shuo said outside, "I'm going to the restaurant first. Don't forget, after dinner, we'll go to the VIP building." When Gu Zheng walked out of the bathroom, Ling Shu was no longer in the room. She looked at her watch, and it was time for the meeting. She thought about what Ling Shu had just said and hesitated whether to go to the restaurant for dinner. At this moment, her cell phone rang. It was her nephew, Liang Tian, calling. "Aunt, my mother is here. I just picked her up from the train station." Liang Tian's voice was as clear as he spoke right before her. "My mother said she really wants to see you. Come over and have dinner with us." After Gu Zheng hung up the phone, she hesitated for a moment, then picked up her small bag, walked out of Building 2, and hurriedly left the South Lake International Convention Center. 3. Tonggui Network. Over a year ago, Liang Tian fulfilled his wish to get into Dongjiang University and became a sophomore. A year ago, when the newly established Tonggui website was recruiting 2 part-time editors from university students, after posting the advertisement, Gu Zheng hadn't expected that the first applicant would be her nephew, Liang Tian. Gu Zheng remembered Liang Tian's first question when he came to report on the website. "Auntie, weren't you a lawyer? Why did you start a website?" In return, Gu Zheng asked, "How did you know I started a website?" "I'm not telling you." Liang Tian tilted his head, blinked his eyes, and smiled mischievously. "Don't forget, you're my idol. I don't miss any of your moves." It was the first time anyone had called her their idol, and even though it was her nephew, Gu Zheng felt pleased. She knew that his mother had influenced Liang Tian from a young age. Kestrel often praised her son. talking about how impressive it was that his aunt was a lawyer in the provincial capital and had even encouraged Liang Tian to choose Dongjiang University as his first choice for college entrance exams. "I want Xiao Xiao to grow up and become a lawyer just like you," Kestrel had told Gu Zheng directly. After enrolling, Liang Tian indeed chose the same law major that Gu Zheng had studied, and now he was applying to be an editor at Tonggui website. Thinking of her deceased brother Zhong Tianyi, Gu Zheng once again felt the strong bonds of blood kinship. "Why did you start a website?" Gu Zheng didn't know how to answer Liang Tian's question. Should she say it was because she had lost 2 court cases in a row and had her contract terminated by the law firm? Or because she had lost faith in the law that had once seemed so sacred to her? Or because the female protagonist inspired her in a TV drama called Divorce Guide? Could she tell her nephew these things? Would Liang Tian think his aunt was too childish, unlike a lawyer with years of professional experience? Gu Zheng felt uncertain. Fortunately, Liang Tian didn't dwell on this question and quickly asked another. "Auntie, why is the website called Tongyi? The character Gui is very rare. I had to look it up in the dictionary." This question was easier to answer. So, Gu Zheng told Liang Tian about her visit to the provincial museum, where she saw an artifact, a bronze container called Tonggui, that Empress Wu Zetian had used to encourage common people to supervise and report on officials at all levels. The Tonggui was shaped somewhat like a ding vessel, made of bronze with several flying dragons carved around it. At that time, she was preparing to launch the website. Everything was ready except for the name. Standing before the Tongyi for a while, suddenly it struck her. Tongyi website. What a resonant and meaningful name. The purpose of the Tongyi, reporting and supervision, matched perfectly with her website's nature. Liang Tian was very satisfied with her answer and enthusiastically said, "I never knew Wu Zetian had such awareness of the rule of law. I should go to the museum someday to see the Tongyi. Maybe I could even write a paper about it." Gu Zheng looked at her nephew, noting how much her brother Zhong Tianyi's handsome face and blue eyes resembled each other. Initially, Gu Zheng ran the Tonggui website alone. As daily visits grew from hundreds to thousands and tens of thousands, she could barely manage by herself. Especially after the website launched a free consultation hotline called Appointment with Gu Zheng, she received daily legal inquiries from netizens, mostly about litigation, including how to hire lawyers, how to file cases, appeals, petitions, and protests. Having worked at the Provincial Women's Federation's Women's Rights Protection Center, Gu Zheng dealt with such issues daily. Combined with her experience as a lawyer, she could provide targeted answers to netizens' consultations. The number of people seeking advice through Appointment with Gu Zheng gradually increased from a few to dozens or even hundreds per day. Between answering consultations and updating the website's content, updates became less frequent, dropping from daily to every 2 or 3 days, which obviously wasn't good for site traffic. To free up time for content editing and filter out trivial questions, she changed Appointment with Gu Zheng from free to charge. However, consultation requests didn't decrease. Dozens or hundreds of questions still came in daily, too many for one person to handle. So, Gu Zheng thought about adding staff. The challenge was that the website was still operating at a loss and didn't even have an office. Hiring full-time editors would require both salaries and office space. After much consideration, she first recruited 2 college students as part-time editors. Gu Zheng hadn't expected her nephew Liang Tian to be the first applicant. As a law student, he was certainly suitable for the website editor position. She had actually thought of him initially but dismissed the idea, worried it would affect his studies. Now that he had come forward himself, she was naturally delighted. However, finding the second editor proved more complicated. There weren't many applicants to begin with, and after reviewing the few resumes several times, none seemed ideal. While she was still struggling with this, one day, Liang Tian brought in a girl, announcing as they entered, "Auntie, didn't you need another editor? How about her?" Gu Zheng looked the girl over. She had a lovely oval face, a petite figure barely reaching Liang Tian's shoulder, 2 small braids, was dressed simply, and appeared about Liang Tian's age. "Oh, which school are you from, and what's your major?" she asked. "She's also from Dongjiang University, and she started studying journalism at the same time as me," Liang Tian answered before the girl could speak. Gu Zheng hesitated upon hearing this. She listed a law major as a primary requirement for the job posting. Liang Tian clearly guessed her concern and said, "Auntie, the website is part of the news industry. Isn't journalism perfect?" Seeing her lack of response, he added, "Auntie, you're focusing all your energy on legal consultation now. The website needs someone who understands design and editing professionally." "Are you saying your aunt doesn't understand the profession?" Gu Zheng teased, seeing Liang Tian's eager expression. "I took electives in Chinese and journalism in college. I'm no amateur at editing." "Auntie, that's not what I meant." Liang Tian realized he'd misspoken and stuck out his tongue at the girl, saying softly, "My aunt was quite the talented scholar in university." Noticing Liang Tian's intimate manner of speaking to the girl, Gu Zheng privately speculated about their relationship. With this in mind, she turned to the girl and asked, "What's your name?" "My name is Tian Qingqing," the girl replied shyly. "Tian Qingqing." Gu Zheng mulled over the name, finding it truly poetic, seeming to overflow with the essence of spring and fields. Perhaps it was because of this name, or the girl's shy and modest demeanor, or Liang Tian's intimate way of speaking to her. Whatever the reason, Gu Zheng decided to hire Tian Qingqing. 4. Emotional education. Following the address Liang Tian sent to her phone, Gu Zheng arrived at a restaurant outside Dongjiang University's West Gate. Despite it being dinner time, the restaurant was quiet due to its out-of-the-way location. As soon as she entered, she saw Kestrel. Kestrel looked much better than she had 2 years ago. Her complexion was rosy, and her clothes were no longer as plain as during their last meeting. She wore 2 large jade bracelets on her wrist, giving her quite the proprietress air. Seeing Gu Zheng, she rose to embrace her, warmly calling her sister. This city dweller's gesture from Kestrel made Gu Zheng somewhat uncomfortable. She joked, "Sister-in-law, you're quite chow these days." Chow was a recently popular term among young people and online, meaning fashionable. Kestrel didn't understand. "I'm not humid at all. I'm still hot." She started to remove the jacket from her dress. Liang Tian covered his mouth to suppress a laugh. "Mom, don't make me laugh. That's not what chow means." Seeing Liang Tian about to explain further, Gu Zheng, worried Kestrel might feel embarrassed, changed the subject. "It's already April. The weather is a bit hot, and you are wearing too much." She helped Kestrel place her jacket on the chair back, then turned to Liang Tian, saying, "Go order the food. I'll chat with your mom." Liang Tian was about to leave when his gaze fixed on Gu Zheng's chest. He asked curiously, "Auntie, what kind of badge is that?" Gu Zheng started, looked down, and realized she still had the conference delegate badge on. She quickly removed it and handed it to Liang Tian. "Keep it as a souvenir." Then, smiling, she added, "Order some good dishes. You might as well take advantage of your mom being a boss now." Liang Tian made a face and ran off. With just the two at the table, Gu Zheng watched Liang Tian's athletic figure disappear and said to Kestrel, "Sister-in-law, have you noticed that Xiao Xiao looks more and more like my brother?" She still called Kestrel sister-in-law as she always had. "Indeed, those eyes are exactly like your brother's," Kestrel said, a trace of sadness crossing her brows. "It's been over 2 years since your brother passed away. I just returned from visiting his grave. The trees around the burial site have grown quite tall." Gu Zheng and Kestrel buried Zhang Tianyi's ashes at Ximen Peak Cemetery in the suburbs 2 years ago. She had planned to visit her brother's grave after the conference, but now the conference hadn't worked out, and Kestrel had already gone to Ximen Peak. Lost in thought, she heard Kestrel say, "Xiao Xiao told me you're letting him do some work at your website, even paying him. Is that true?" Gu Zheng smiled. "It's just part-time work, not much money, just a token, really." Kestrel said. You're his aunt. He's your own nephew. If you're giving him work to train him, why pay him? Gu Zheng said, no matter who it is, work deserves pay. I can't exploit Liang Tian's labor. Exploit. I feel like I've heard that word somewhere. Kestrel rubbed her head, then suddenly clapped her hands and said, oh, right. During winter break when Xiao Xiao came home, he called me a capitalist who exploits workers. Gu Zheng couldn't help but smile. Just then, Liang Tian returned from ordering, so she asked him, Liang Tian, is what your mom is saying true? Liang Tian sheepishly replied, last semester in Introduction to Marxism, the teacher had us apply Marxist theory to analyze social issues. So you really criticized your mom as a capitalist? Next, you'll be dividing up your family's wealth? Gu Zheng said, half joking and half serious. I don't have much education and can't manage this university student anymore. You'll have to help me guide him properly. Kestrel became serious and continued. He's so grown up now. Back in Red Rock Valley, I'd be holding grandchildren by now. But Xiao Xiao doesn't even have a girlfriend yet. I came this time not just to visit his father's grave, but also to ask you, as his aunt, to help him find someone soon. I've got it all planned out. Once he graduates, I'll sell the restaurant and buy him an apartment in the provincial capital. When he gets married, I can help look after his children. Kestrel poured everything out like beans from a bamboo tube, speaking what had been bottled up inside her for a long time. Liang Tian couldn't stop her. Standing beside them, his face as red as a young girl's, he pouted and muttered, Mom, aren't you forcing marriage on me? Then he stormed out of the restaurant in anger. After Liang Tian left, Gu Zheng told Kestrel, Sister-in-law, we don't need to worry about Liang Tian's personal matters. Hearing something in her tone, Kestrel's eyebrows shot up. Sister, are you saying Xiao Xiao has someone? I'm not entirely sure about their relationship, Gu Zheng hesitated, but then carefully related how Liang Tian had recommended Tian Qingqing to her. You mean Xiao Xiao has been secretly dating someone behind my back? Kestrel mumbled, half believing, half doubting. Sister-in-law, it's just my speculation. Don't take it too seriously. Just then, the food arrived. 4 large plates of stir-fried dishes plus a chicken hot pot. Quite a feast indeed. Kestrel called out, Xiao Xiao, Xiao Xiao! And Liang Tian came back from outside, still talking on his phone as he walked. Gu Zheng rinsed the bowls and chopsticks with hot water and casually asked, Who were you talking to? After quietly saying a few more words on the phone and hanging up, Liang Tian told Gu Zheng, Tian Qingqing, she took leave to go home. Where's her home? Not far, just on Phoenix Island in Niangzhu Lake. Liang Tian answered while placing a chicken leg in both his mother's and aunt's bowls. This restaurant's chicken hot pot is delicious. My classmates and I come here to feast often. But Gu Zheng did not hear his comment and continued, It's not even holiday time. Why did she go back? Tian Qingqing said she's going to sweep her aunt's grave. It's Qingming Festival these days, right? Liang Tian said, glancing at Gu Zheng. Qingqing told me about her aunt. She was a community teacher who drowned in Niangzhu Lake while teaching students. It was even in the newspapers. Every Qingming Festival, she goes back to sweep her aunt's grave. Here, Liang Tian remembered something. Oh, right, Auntie. Could you give my wages to Qingqing instead? Well, why? Gu Zheng was startled. Liang Tian's expression darkened as he lowered his head. After a pause, he said, Qingqing's financial situation is tough. Her parents abandoned her and went south when she was little, with no word from them since. Her only relative, her aunt, drowned. She only finished middle school thanks to the help from villagers, and she got to university because someone supported her. But recently that person was sentenced to prison, making her situation even more difficult. Liang Tian looked at Gu Zheng, pleading, I want to give my wages to Qingqing. She can't even afford a second-hand computer. She has to go to the library for her website work. Auntie, would that be okay? Instead of answering Liang Tian's request, Gu Zheng asked, You mentioned someone was supporting Tian Qingqing through university. What's that person's name? I don't remember the name clearly. Qing called him uncle. Gu Zheng made a soft "oh" sound and remained silent for a while. Kestrel had been listening to their conversation and now spoke as if she'd discovered a secret. Xiao, your aunt just told me about your relationship with this Tian Qing. Why didn't you tell me earlier? You had me worrying needlessly. Liang Tian gave his mother a look. Mom, what are you talking about? Qing and I are just ordinary classmates. King, using such an intimate way of addressing her, and you say you're just classmates? Kestrel giggled, turning to Gu Zheng. Sister, bringing these two young people together. You've done great for your brother and sister-in-law. Here, let me toast you with tea. Liang Tian became even more embarrassed. His mother and aunt were the two people who loved him most in the world. He had grown up under the care of these two women, and even today they still treated him like a child. But he wasn't a child anymore. He was a university student. Liang Tian felt a sense of weariness and rebellion toward his mother's and aunt's almost excessive affection. Now, watching his mother and aunt playing off each other, he furrowed his brow as if pondering how to deal with them. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly looked up and asked Gu Zheng, Auntie, was Zhang Da really a traitor? The question caught Gu Zheng by surprise. She didn't know why her nephew had suddenly brought up this issue. She turned to look at Kestrel, who also appeared stunned, as if her son had posed an enormous challenge that left her at a loss. Seeing their expressions, Liang Tian prompted them like a teacher addressing students. I've read the biography of Zhongdi that Dad left behind. Gu Zheng and Kestrel both let out an "oh" in unison. They exchanged glances, clearly considering how to answer Liang Tian's thorny question. Regarding the manuscript her brother had left to Kestrel before his death, Gu Zheng had read it while handling Wang Sheng's case. She knew that her brother Zhong Tianyi had been troubled and tormented his entire life by the case of his never-met grandfather, dying without finding a satisfactory answer. His choice of Red Rock Valley, where their father had last disappeared, as the place to bid farewell to the world was perhaps a kind of declaration of his desire to wash away shame. In Gu Zheng's memory, her grandfather and father were just abstract symbols or vague shadows appearing in dreams. She didn't want to have any real contact with them from childhood to adulthood. People are tired enough of living in the world, and the fetters they are subject to are complicated enough. Why should they put unnecessary shackles on themselves? So she had never mentioned it to her nephew, Liang Tian. She believed her sister-in-law Kestrel felt the same way. But now, with Liang Tian suddenly raising this question, she felt backed into a corner, unable to avoid it any longer. Well, I don't know. Gu Zheng hesitated. Actually, even the author wasn't sure. He was just analyzing, speculating. But the book clearly states that Zhang Da wasn't a traitor. Liang Tian suddenly interrupted Gu Zheng, speaking with certainty. The real traitor was... No! Before Liang Tian could finish, Gu Zheng cut him off, thinking of Wang Sheng still serving his sentence in prison. Things might not be that simple. Even the author himself is now in prison. Gu Zheng's words seemed to contradict Liang Tian and defend someone else, sounding ambiguous. Even she felt they lacked conviction. Then why did you defend him? Liang Tian was clearly unsatisfied with his aunt's response. After a pause, he asked, was he a good or bad person? Gu Zheng knew Liang Tian was referring to Wang Sheng. As a law student at Dongjiang University, he had clearly learned about the case she had handled. Unable to answer her nephew easily, feeling it would take more than a few sentences to explain, she said gently, Xiao, as a lawyer, I have a duty to defend people whether they're good or bad. Then, what about Zhang Da? Liang Tian pressed further. Was he a good person or a bad person? For Gu Zheng, this was an even thornier question. Distinguishing between good and bad people is complex, she said vaguely, avoiding Liang Tian's eyes. I once asked your father, and he said he didn't know either. Liang Tian's eyes, so similar to his father Zhong Tianyi's, swept back and forth between his aunt Gu Zheng and his mother's faces like question marks, seeming somewhat confrontational. Gu Zheng and Kestrel both felt a certain pressure. They realized that Liang Tian had grown up. He was no longer their little Xiao Xiao. Chapter 6, 1. Marx Group. Liang Tian and Tian Qingqing met in the Marxist reading group. Due to his heavy course load, Liang Tian rarely participated in student unions or university club activities when he first entered university. He hadn't even joined a single club, focusing all his energy on coursework. Despite this, he still failed 2 courses in the final exams, one of which was Introduction to Marxism. Introduction to Marxism, fully titled Introduction to Marxism, Mao Zedong Thought, Deng Xiaoping Theory, and the Important Thought of Three Represents, was a required course for undergraduates. According to university rules, failing a required course meant repeating the year, and failing twice meant no degree upon graduation. Liang Tian had entered Dongjiang University, ranking 2nd in his county, but failing 2 courses in his first semester had blown his self-esteem. During winter break, he couldn't bring himself to tell his mother about his grades and hurried back to school before the holiday ended. Following his counselor's advice, Liang Tian signed up for the Marxist reading group in the 2nd semester of his freshman year. This club focused on studying original Marxist texts. Liang Tian's initial motivation was to deepen his understanding of Marxism so that he could pass the Introduction to Marxism exam quickly. The Marxist reading group, shortened to Marx Group, was founded by philosophy students and had only about a dozen members, mainly from the philosophy department. There were only 2 students from other departments, Liang Tian and a journalism student named Tian Qingqing. During the group's first activity of the new semester, when each member explained why they joined, some talked about seeking truth, others about pursuing progress, all sorts of answers. When it was Liang Tian's turn, he hesitated before saying,
My motivation isn't as lofty as everyone else's. I joined just to pass the exam.
His words triggered laughter among the students. After the laughter died down, everyone turned their attention to Tian Qingqing, with someone teasing, Classmate, you didn't join just to pass the exam too, did you? Tian Qingqing clearly felt pressured by Liang Tian's answer and everyone's reaction. After a moment's silence, she replied, I joined the Marx Group to understand what Marxism really is. Though her voice was soft, her words landed like a stone in a lake, triggering passionate responses. Well said. That's exactly why I joined too. Me too. After studying Introduction to Marxism for a semester, the more I study, the more confused I get about what Marxism really is. I joined to help me join the party and pursue progress. Yes, this is the true meaning of why our group was established. Everyone started talking at once, even arguing with each other. Tian Qingqing looked startled, like a child who had caused trouble, seeming somewhat at a loss. At this moment, a thin, bespectacled young man waved his hand, signaling everyone to quiet down. Classmates, what Tian Qingqing just raised is a very good and profound question. This question not only exists now, but has existed since the birth of Marxism and troubled many people. He paused briefly, then quoted extensively. On August 31st, 1890, Engels once replied to the editorial department of the Saxon Workers' newspaper saying, In terms of theory, I saw on this newspaper a Marxism that was completely distorted. Its characteristics are, first, obviously not understanding the worldview they claim to be defending, second, knowing nothing about the historical facts that are decisive at each specific moment, third, obviously displaying the infinite superiority complex typical of German literary figures. When Marx talked about Marxism, which was widely spread among some French people in the late 1970s, he also foresaw such students saying at the time, I only know that I am not a Marxist. If these words are taken out of context, one might think Marx was denying being a Marxist. However, considering the original context, we can discover that Marx's words played an ironic role. At that time, some so-called progressive people were carrying the banner of Marxism while doing things that were anti-Marxist. Marx was so disgusted by this that he denied being a Marxist in order to distinguish himself from those various fake Marxists and anti-Marxists. This bespectacled student was named Chen Gang. He was the president of Ma Hui and a fourth-year philosophy student who had just been admitted to Beta's Marxist Studies master's program. He was not only well-versed in the original works of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Mao. Still, he was also familiar with Western Marxist philosophers like Derrida, Althusser, Bourdieu, Samir Amin, and Wallerstein. In Ma Hui, he enjoyed the reputation of a theorist. This quotation-filled speech made many students feel enlightened and suddenly clear-minded. From that day on, Liang Tian began to look at Tian Qingqing with new eyes. At first glance, she was an unremarkable girl. She wore her hair in 2 small pigtails, and plain clothing made her look rustic. At 1.60 meters tall, with an oval face, her eyes were like stones soaking in a pool, black and bright, calm with a hint of subtle melancholy. Tian Qingqing was relatively introverted. During Ma Hui's study activities, when everyone else enthusiastically spoke up, she would sit quietly, listening and taking notes in her notebook. Unless someone called on her, she rarely took the initiative to speak. One time, when Chen Gang was leading everyone to study Marx's Wage, Labor, and Capital, he said, "In this article, Marx elaborates on 3 points. 1. How capitalists establish their ruling position and their exploitation of workers through wage labor. 2. The inevitable process of destruction facing the middle bourgeoisie and peasant classes under the existing system. 3. The situation of European bourgeoisie being enslaved and exploited by England, the world market hegemon in commercial affairs." In his Marxist theory course, Liang Tian also heard the teacher lecture about this Marxist work. Now, hearing Chen Gang explain it again in exhaustive detail, he felt drowsy. At this moment, he suddenly heard Tian Qingqing softly say, "When Marx wrote this article, he understood that workers at the time could buy 2 pounds of sugar for 2 francs, meaning the price of 2 pounds of sugar was 2 francs, and 2 francs for 12 hours of labor was the price of 12 hours of labor. Through this, he discovered the secret of surplus value. But how many of us know how many hours workers work today, how much they earn each day and month, and how much surplus value factories extract from them? When we study Marxism, can we connect what we hear in class and our club studies with the current reality?" The erudite Chen Gang interrupted Tian Qingqing. "Tian Qingqing, what you're saying makes sense, but we are, after all, students and should focus on studying. Take Liang Tian, for example. He's still struggling to pass, let alone consider graduate school." Chen Gang had scored a perfect 100 in his Marxist theory course, the highest in the class. It was said he could recite the Communist Manifesto backward. The department had originally planned to recommend him for their graduate program, but he managed to get into Beta through his own efforts. Liang Tian genuinely admired Chen Gang. At this moment, he detected a hint of pride in Chen Gang's tone, but also felt that Tian Qingqing's words were not without reason. Looking around at the other students, he saw them exchanging glances, their faces bewildered. "What are good grades for? Is it just to get into graduate school or to find a good job after graduation?" Tian Qingqing said, her voice still soft, as if talking to herself and seeming to ask Chen Gang and everyone present. Seeing no one answered, she continued. "A few days ago, I read a paper Marx wrote when he finished middle school, called Considerations of Youth in Choosing a Profession. Let me read a passage for everyone. When choosing a profession, the main guideposts we should follow are human happiness and our own perfection. We should not believe these 2 interests are hostile, conflicting, or that one must destroy the other. Human nature is such that people can only achieve their own perfection by working for the perfection of their contemporaries and their happiness. If a person only works for themselves, they may become a famous scholar, philosopher, or outstanding poet, but they will never become a perfect, flawless, great person. History acknowledges those who become noble by working for common goals as great people. Experience praises those who bring happiness to the majority as the happiest people. If we choose the profession that can labor most for human welfare, then the heavy burden cannot crush us, because we are dedicating ourselves to everyone. What we will feel then is not a pitiful, limited, selfish pleasure, but a happiness that belongs to hundreds of millions. Our cause will exist silently but eternally, and facing our ashes, noble people will shed hot tears. Tian Qingqing's voice wasn't loud, and her Mandarin wasn't standard, carrying a slight accent from the South Lake area in the countryside. Liang Tian even failed to understand some words, but something inside him seemed to be touched. From primary to middle school, he had always been a diligent, studious, good student. At home, his mother had long taught him to aspire to be like his aunt and get into Dongjiang University to make her proud. Liang Tian understood what his mother meant by making her proud. He had never seen his father since birth and was raised entirely by his mother, who had nurtured him through thick and thin. His mother had to run a small restaurant and take care of his life and studies, working as if she could split herself into two. Growing up in such an environment made Liang Tian more mature than other children. At school, he was almost always in the top 3 of his class, and every teacher believed he would definitely get into a top university with a bright future. After getting into Dongjiang University, Liang Tian maintained these expectations for himself, choosing the law department and hoping to become a lawyer or judge like his aunt Gu Qing after graduation. But now, after hearing Tian Qingqing read Marx's passage, he suddenly began to doubt himself. The life goals that had always been clear and solid in his mind became blurry and wavering. He went to the library and found Marx's article, reading it through several times. His previously calm and steady heart was like a pond being stirred. For several consecutive days, he was distracted in class, and when he returned to his dorm room, he couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. When she read the article, his mind alternated between Marx's words and Tian Qingqing's resolute expression. He discovered that this seemingly fragile girl was actually quite beautiful, like an uncut jade buried in the soil, naturally beautiful like a lotus emerging from clear water. Liang Tian's heart skipped a beat. 2. Canteen and cold drink shop. The Marxist reading group study activities were usually held on weekend afternoons or evenings. However, for several consecutive times, Tian Qingqing did not show up. Usually, she would sit next to Liang Tian, and over time, even if she were late, other students would save her seat. Now, seeing the empty seat beside him, Liang Tian felt a sense of emptiness and inexplicable loss. One afternoon, Liang Tian stayed late in the library and arrived at the cafeteria after the dinner rush. The large cafeteria had only a few people left. After getting his meal, he randomly chose a table, sat down to eat, and read. As he was eating, he heard the sound of mopping. Normally, after meals, tables and floors would be covered with leftover food, and the cafeteria aunties would take a while to clean up. At first, Liang Tian thought it was a cafeteria worker cleaning, so he stood up to make space. But when he looked up, he was surprised to see Tian Qingqing standing before him, wearing a cafeteria worker's uniform with a white cap bearing Dongda Cafeteria and sleeve guards. In one hand, she carried a plastic trash bin and a mop, in the other, a dirty, greasy rag. "Tian Qingqing, what are you doing?" Liang Tian asked, eyes wide with surprise. "A few days ago, the cafeteria was hiring part-time cleaning staff, and I got the job." Tian Qingqing smiled slightly, seemingly trying to change the subject. "You're here so late today. Are you studying hard for graduate school?" "No need to rush. I'm only a sophomore." Liang Tian's gaze was still fixed on Tian Qingqing, and his expression was curious. "No wonder you've missed several Marxist reading group activities. You're working as a cafeteria cleaner." He half-jokingly asked, "You're not following Marx's example, trying to experience workers' lives firsthand, are you?" Tian Qingqing stammered, "Continue eating. I still have work to do." She then picked up her trash bin and rag and moved to another table. Liang Tian quickly finished his meal and walked over, taking the mop from her trash bin. "Let me help you mop," he said. "This isn't your job," Tian Qingqing said, her face turning slightly red as she snatched the mop back. If the cafeteria management sees you helping me, they'll think I'm slacking off." She skillfully wiped the tables with her rag. Liang Tian stood nearby, watching her efficient movements, stunned for a long while before leaving the cafeteria. Back in his dorm room, Liang Tian opened the book he'd borrowed from the library. Though he stared at it for a long time, he couldn't read a single word. The entire night, his mind was filled with the image of Tian Qingqing holding a plastic bin and a rag in her cafeteria work uniform. This image merged with her resolute expression when reading Marx's articles, deeply etching itself into his heart. From that day forward, Liang Tian deliberately arrived late for weekend dinners. When he entered the cafeteria, he would see Tian Qingqing mopping floors, wiping tables, and straightening chairs. She worked so carefully and attentively that when occasional students who hadn't finished eating gave her impatient looks, she would stop and offer an apologetic smile before carefully working around them. Liang Tian observed all of this, and his feelings of compassion grew. One day, after Liang Tian finished his meal, he walked up behind Tian Qingqing, who was wiping tables and picking up the mop from her plastic bin. He began mopping silently. Tian Qingqing was so focused on her work that she didn't initially notice. After wiping a few tables, she heard the sound of mopping behind her and turned around, startled. She saw Liang Tian holding the mop exaggeratedly, leaving uneven wet and dry patches on the floor. Tian Qingqing couldn't help but chuckle. She walked over to take the mop from him, but he pulled it away. "Let me help you," he said, his face flushed with a pleading tone. "It's obvious you've never done this kind of work before. Let me teach you." Tian Qingqing rolled her eyes, taking the mop from his hands. She demonstrated the proper technique with a skilled, graceful movement. Liang Tian noticed that her mopping style was light and elegant, and the floor became as smooth and clean as a mirror, reflecting their shadows. From that day forward, every weekend after dinner, the student cafeteria would see two young people cleaning together, a woman wiping tables and a man mopping floors. They worked very seriously and were remarkably well coordinated. The woman wore a cafeteria worker's uniform, while the man wore student clothing. No one could discern the exact nature of their relationship. One day, after finishing their cleaning and preparing to leave the cafeteria as usual, Liang Tian suddenly said to Tian Qingqing, "Let me buy you a cold drink." Liang Tian's tone was very solemn, carrying a gentlemanly air reminiscent of Western movies. Tian Qingqing was momentarily surprised. It was June, and the weather had become quite hot. They had just finished cleaning, and their faces were sweaty. After a brief hesitation, she agreed. Right next to the cafeteria was a beverage shop. Students typically liked to buy iced tea, soda, or ice cream after meals. Iced tea cost 1 yuan a bottle, popsicles were 50 cents, and ice cream was slightly more expensive, ranging from 1.5 to 2 yuan a box, prices affordable for most college students. The shop owner was business savvy. Besides the busy sales area, they had created a separate space for drinking beverages, clearly designed for college couples. Regular customers privately called this area the Lover's Corner. A few tables and chairs set up in a somewhat quieter area compared to the bustling sales space. Liang Tian had previously always bought drinks and left quickly, drinking while walking. This time, he bought 2 bottles of iced tea and an ice cream for Tian Qingqing. He felt that eating while walking wasn't inappropriate, so he walked into the Lover's Corner. The corner was very quiet, with only Liang Tian, Tian Qingqing, and another couple present. The other couple were clearly lovers, sitting very close together. Each was eating an ice cream, with the boy occasionally feeding the girl with his spoon, showing no reservation. Seeing their intimate behavior, Liang Tian felt his face grow hot and his heart race. He stole a glance at Tian Qingqing and saw her blushing too, which made him even more uncomfortable. As if to escape this awkward situation, he said,
"You missed several Marxist reading group activities. Everyone was studying the Communist Manifesto together. The discussions were quite lively." "Really? What did they discuss?" Tian Qingqing asked with genuine interest.
Some members believed that Marx and Engels didn't negate capitalism in the manifesto, but fully affirmed capitalism's role in social development. For example, they wrote, "The bourgeoisie, historically, has played a most revolutionary part. In 100 years, it has created more massive and more colossal productive forces than all preceding generations together." "Oh, what else?" she prompted. Liang Tian, who had initially just been looking for a conversation topic to avoid awkwardness, was surprised by her interest and continued recounting the discussion. He continued explaining, everyone was also endlessly debating the ultimate goal of communism, with all sorts of perspectives. Qin Gong's viewpoint received the most support. "What did he say?" Tian Qingqing asked. He quoted directly from the Communist Manifesto. "In place of the old bourgeois society, with its classes and class antagonisms, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all." Tian Qingqing was eating ice cream and stopped her spoon, asking seriously, "Did he mention that Marx and Engels also emphasized in the Communist Manifest that the bourgeois production and exchange relations, the bourgeois property relations, this modern bourgeois society that seemed to create such massive productive materials and exchange means by magic, are actually just a historical process of modern productive forces fighting against production relations and property relations? Are the weapons the bourgeoisie used to overthrow the feudal system now turned against the bourgeoisie themselves? That they not only forged the weapons of their own destruction but also produced the modern workers who will use these weapons." Liang Tian, who had only heard explanations in his Marxist theory class and had never fully read the Communist Manifesto, was stunned by her extensive quotation. "I didn't expect you to be so familiar with the Communist Manifesto. I first fell in love with this book when I saw it from Old Principle," Tian Qingqing said. "It's written like poetry, full of philosophical depth. I've read it countless times, and I can recite many passages. Listen." She put down her ice cream and began to recite solemnly, like a schoolchild reciting a text. "A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite." Her voice suddenly rose as she reached the final line, echoing through the small lover's corner like music. At that moment, Liang Tian thought Tian Qingqing resembled Joan of Arc in the famous painting, beautiful, solemn, and sacred. The couple next to them turned, surprised by their conversation. Tian Qingqing, perhaps realizing their topic was inappropriate for the setting, smiled awkwardly and signaled to Liang Tian. They both left the beverage shop. Liang Tian's mind still resonated with the powerful sentences Tian Qingqing had recited. Curiously, he wondered, who was this old principal? 3. Two worlds. From that day forward, Liang Tian gradually entered Tian Qingqing's world, an entirely different one from his own. Less than 100 kilometers from the provincial capital of Dajiang City, there's an enormous lake called Niangzhu Lake, so vast you can't see its shores. The lake has many islands, and the largest among them is Phoenix Island. The island is covered with Chinese tuna, maples, and white poplars, with blue skies reflecting in clear waters and fragrant seasons all year round. It's breathtakingly beautiful. That's where I was born, Tian Qingqing spoke in a storytelling tone. When I was very young, my parents left the island to work in Guangdong. I heard that not long after arriving there, my mother became a qiao to a local landlord. Qiao means mistress in the south. When my father found out, he confronted the old man but never returned. Some say gangsters hired by the old man broke my father's legs, and he ended up becoming a beggar on the streets. Others say he was working in a factory when a lathe severed his hand, and after being dismissed by his boss, he vanished without a trace. After my parents had gone to Guangdong, I lived with my aunt. She was the youngest substitute teacher at Phoenix Elementary School and had studied at Niangzhou Normal School. She could have become a public school teacher and transferred to work in the county town, but Phoenix Elementary lacked teachers. She gave up this opportunity to prevent the island's children from dropping out and returned to the island before completing her studies. After she had dropped out, her class advisor even came to the island to persuade her to return. I met him once. He was a graduate student from Dongjiang University, assigned to Niangzhou Normal School for training. He was thin and frail, refined in manner, with one single-lidded eye and one double-lidded eye. You could tell he was a scholarly person at a glance. He cared deeply about my aunt, and she greatly respected him. This respect wasn't just a student's reverence for her teacher, but also carried a young woman's admiration for a man. They often exchanged letters, and I once saw a poem he wrote to my aunt. If she hadn't met with misfortune later, perhaps they might have... Liang Tian was completely absorbed in her story when the sudden mention of misfortune made his heart sink. He couldn't help but ask, What happened? During my first year of middle school, my aunt was on her way to teach at the Jianzhou Island Branch School when she encountered a violent storm and fell into Niangzhou Lake. As Tian Qingqing spoke, she bit her lip, her eyes reddening. Her eyelashes fluttered twice, and crystal-clear tears rolled down her cheeks. It was a weekend afternoon, just after Liang Tian and Tian Qingqing had finished attending a Marxist Society meeting. They left the teaching building and walked into the People's Development Forest. During the day, Dongjiang University students liked to come here to study and take walks. At night, many couples made it their romantic sanctuary. It was said that the grove used to be called Lover's Forest. Still, after some senior teachers complained that it damaged the school's reputation, it was renamed People's Development Forest, a single-word change that transformed its ambiance and connotation entirely. In the forest stood an octagonal pavilion called the Evergreen Pavilion, covered in sprawling grapevines. University students often held birthday parties or dances there, and the Marxist Society had also organized several activities there. Now, seeing the grief on Tian Qingqing's face, Liang Tian took her arm and led her into the Evergreen Pavilion. They sat down on a stone bench, and he pulled a tissue from his pocket and offered it to her. Tian Qingqing accepted it, gently wiped away her tears, and continued with downcast eyes. After my aunt's death, the district government honored her as an outstanding people's teacher. But shortly after, Phoenix Elementary School was disbanded. Disbanded? Why? Tian Qingqing spoke softly. Because the province designated our island as an international tourism development zone. All the islanders were relocated to the county town's suburbs, and Phoenix Elementary School was closed along with it. Relocated to the county town? He hesitated before asking, wouldn't the living conditions and schooling be better and more convenient there? Tian Qingqing raised her face, gazing at the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, and shook her head. The islanders had been fishermen and farmers for generations. After moving to the suburbs, they were essentially unemployed, wandering aimlessly like lost souls. Some built grass huts on the island, preferring to survive on chaff and wild vegetables rather than leave. Led by the old principal, they started a movement to protect the island, frequently petitioning the municipal and provincial governments, but each time they were either arrested or driven away. The old principal. Liang Tian recalled Tian Qingqing's recitation of the Communist Manifesto. Yes, she nodded. After Phoenix Island was converted into an international tourist destination, old principal moved out of the elementary school and settled in a stone house at the foot of Xiaolong Mountain, by the Martyrs' Memorial Cemetery entrance. The stone house's walls were covered in moss, surrounded by wild grass deeper than that in the cemetery itself, with neither electricity nor running water. By then, I was attending Niangzhou District High School with my tuition funded by the old principal. He was childless and lived alone. His parents had been killed by the Nationalist Return Corps before liberation and were buried in the cemetery. I would always return from the county town to visit him during holidays. When I entered the stone house several times, I found him sitting at the stone table, reading a thin book. The book was yellowed with age, printed in vertical traditional characters, with both the cover and inner pages incomplete, like dried leaves that would crumble at a touch. Wearing reading glasses, he would recite like he was teaching a class. All previous historical movements were movements of minorities, or in the interest of minorities. The proletarian movement is the self-conscious, independent movement of the immense majority in the interest of the immense majority. The proletariat, the lowest stratum of our present society, cannot stir or raise itself up without the superincumbent strata of official society being sprung into the air. Once, when he was out, I opened the book's cover and saw several large red characters in traditional script, the Communist Manifesto. Tian Qingqing paused here, remaining silent for a while. When she spoke again, her eyes glistened with tears. During my first semester of university, as soon as winter break began, I returned to Phoenix Island to visit the old principal. But when I entered the stone house, I found him slumped over that stone table. He had been dead for some time, his body already stiff. The Communist Manifesto lay open before him, with crooked lines of varying thickness underlined throughout. Liang Tian's heart grew heavy as he listened, now understanding why Tian Qingqing was so familiar with the Communist Manifesto. Suddenly a question occurred to him. After the old principal passed away, how did you pay for university? Remember when I mentioned my aunt's class advisor? Tian Qingqing said. He had been supporting me since high school, and in university, he paid for both my tuition and living expenses. But then he, too, met with misfortune. What happened? Liang Tian's heart sank once again. He was prosecuted and sentenced to 3 years in prison, Tian Qingqing said gravely. His name was Wang Sheng. I always called him Uncle. Wang Sheng. Liang Tian felt the name was familiar but couldn't quite place it. Soon after, summer vacation began. When Liang Tian returned to his home in Red Rock Valley, he couldn't forget Tian Qingqing for a moment. Her tragic experiences seemed to come from another world entirely, and those beautiful, melancholic eyes kept appearing in his mind like stars. Especially when she recited the Communist Manifesto, that rare resilience in a young woman's demeanor deeply touched his heart. A strange feeling began to grow within him quietly. This feeling wasn't merely sympathy for Tian Qingqing, but rather an inner attraction. Every smile and every word from her could create ripples in his heart. This was both a youthful surge and an emotional tempering, an experience entirely new to him. In all his years, Liang Tian had never liked a girl before, nor did he know what love felt like. But now a vague sentiment was slowly sprouting in his heart. Sharing your pain, rejoicing in your happiness. When he used to hear this popular song, its lyrics seemed half-comprehensible. Still, now Liang Tian seemed to understand that loving someone wasn't just about romantic moments under flowers and moonlight, but about being willing to weather life's storms together. More importantly, something that had long been dormant in Liang Tian's heart quietly awakened. Later he would realize that this something was faith. He had never contemplated such things before. Like most children from comfortable families, besides studying, he spent most of his free time online, playing games, watching movies and TV shows, and following celebrity news and dramas. He particularly loved Taiwanese and Korean dramas like Meteor Garden and Perfect Match, especially Stephen Chow's A Chinese Odyssey. After entering university, like most of his classmates, he studied diligently, but only to secure a good job after graduation and not disappoint his parents. In fact, this was exactly what his mother hoped for him. But now, Tian Qingqing's emotional connection to the Communist Manifesto seemed to open a door before Liang Tian, a door leading to a world he had neither understood nor cared about before. Marx's words particularly struck him like thunder. If we have chosen the position in life where we can most of all work for mankind, no burdens can bow us down, because they are sacrifices for the benefit of all. Then we shall experience no petty, limited, selfish joy. Still, our happiness will belong to millions. Our deeds will live on quietly but perpetually at work, and over our ashes will be shed the hot tears of noble people. Liang Tian felt that, compared to such ideals, his previous life goals had been incredibly selfish and petty. He felt ashamed. Through this self-reflection and enlightenment, Liang Tian's mindset began to change. Previously, in his Marxist theory classes, he simply took notes on what the teacher said and memorized key points, never exploring their deeper meaning or reading the original texts. But now he was no longer satisfied with just textbook conclusions and classroom lectures. He began borrowing original works from the library to study. He read the brief 15,000-word Communist Manifesto several times. During this summer break, he even brought home 2 volumes of Capital, reading and taking notes to prepare for his participation in future Marxist society activities. Kestrel also noticed the big changes in her son this time home. Previously, when he returned, he would either play games or go to the movies with young people from town. But this time, he stayed inside, spending whole days reading in the study. She thought it was natural for him to be different now that he was a university student and didn't think much of it. But one day, her son suddenly approached her with an unusually serious tone. "Mom, I need to ask you something." Her son had never spoken to her in such a manner before. Kestrel was taken aback and asked, "What is it? Go ahead." "Every time I've asked you what my father did for a living, you've been evasive," Liang Tian said with pursed lips. "Now that I'm a university student, surely you should tell me." For all these years, Kestrel had concealed Zhang Tianyi's true identity from her son, including their brief but legendary marriage. If Zhang Tianyi hadn't come to Red Rock Valley when seriously ill, she might never have let father and son recognize each other. Now, faced with her son's renewed questioning, Kestrel still hesitated. Seeing his mother's reluctance, Liang Tian asked directly, "Mom, tell me, was my father a very wealthy man?" Kestrel avoided her son's eyes, which looked so much like Zhang Tianyi's, and stammered, "Why would you say that? If he wasn't wealthy, how could he have bought you such a large insurance policy before he died?" This was the only thing Kestrel had ever told her son about Zhang Tianyi. Hearing this now, she knew she couldn't hide it anymore, and forced herself to say, "Xiao, you're right. Your father was a big businessman. He used to own many companies in Chuzhou and Dajiang." Liang Tian laughed coldly, saying, "So, he was a capitalist." Kestrel was unfamiliar with the term capitalist and looked at her son in surprise. "What? What did you say?" "Mom, you're the same." Liang Tian turned his gaze toward his mother, his face full of contempt. "You're all capitalists who exploit workers and extract surplus value." From her son's expression, Kestrel finally understood what he meant. She said with a mix of laughter and tears, "Mom works so hard running this tiny restaurant, and it's all to raise you. The money I earn is barely enough to pay for your education. How could that make me a capitalist?" However, Liang Tian ignored her and returned to the study to continue reading. The summer vacation quickly came to an end. Before returning to school, Liang Tian had one more conversation with his mother that again shocked Kestrel. "Mom, I've looked into it. You haven't signed labor contracts with any of the workers in the restaurant, nor have you paid their social insurance and housing fund. You should sign contracts with them." "They're all folks from our hometown. What's the need for contracts?" Kestrel said with a bitter smile. "Go ask around town. See if any employer has ever signed contracts. Without contracts, their labor rights aren't legally protected," Liang Tian said seriously. "Not paying their social insurance and housing fund is exploiting workers and violating labor law." Kestrel stared at her son's serious face, so similar to Zhang Tianyi's, and found herself at a loss for words. 4. Engels, Poems or Stories. Liang Tian returned to Dongjiang University a day before classes began, hoping to see Tian Qingqing early. He wrote 2 letters to her during summer break but received no reply. Tian Qingqing didn't have a phone and hadn't left him any other contact information. After spending over a month at home, Liang Tian finished reading Capital and filled half a notebook with notes. He had many thoughts he wanted to share with her. The day he returned to school, he went to the girls' dormitory to look for her but found no one. He tried again the next day, but her roommate said she hadn't returned. This continued for 3 days. Liang Tian grew anxious, worried something might have happened to her. A week after classes began, Tian Qingqing finally returned to school. Liang Tian, my roommate said you came looking for me several times. Did you need something? Hearing Tian Qingqing's voice on the phone, Liang Tian exclaimed joyfully, Do I need a reason to look for you? Not seeing you for days after school started nearly worried me to death. After getting to know each other last semester, Liang Tian and Tian Qingqing spoke casually, having moved past the formality of mere classmates. Liang Tian's tone even carried the intimacy of a lover. Are you free now? I want to see you right away at the Evergreen Pavilion. Liang Tian hung up and left his dormitory, heading toward the Evergreen Pavilion. Summer had passed, and the People's Development Forest was sparse and fresh in the morning, displaying autumn's scenery. The cicadas' songs had lost their summer's passionate intensity, and the grass between the trees had turned from green to yellow, showing signs of withering. Since classes had just begun, the vast grove was nearly empty of students studying or walking, giving it a somewhat desolate feeling. After waiting in the Evergreen Pavilion for a few minutes, Liang Tian saw a girl walking along the winding path from the female dormitory. He recognized Tian Qingqing's delicate figure immediately and eagerly went to meet her. As he got closer, he was taken aback. Compared to a month ago, she had lost considerable weight. Her oval face had grown longer, her once fair complexion had darkened and roughened, and those eyes that used to shine like stars had dimmed significantly. She looked as if she had just recovered from a serious illness. Qingqing, what happened to you? Have you been sick? Liang Tian asked anxiously, dropping the Tian and calling her just Qingqing, revealing his concern and care. I'm not sick, Tian Qingqing said, shaking her head. I'm just a bit tired. Her voice was hoarse, her face etched with exhaustion and fatigue. Only then did Liang Tian notice she was wearing gray working clothes with paint stains on the sleeves, looking like a factory worker. Compared to Liang Tian's clean student attire, the contrast was stark. Puzzled, he asked, Why are you wearing these clothes? Tian Qingqing gave him a sidelong glance and asked in return, Don't they look good? Liang Tian wanted to say these work clothes looked much better than the cleaning uniform she wore when working in the cafeteria. However, he felt embarrassed and stammered, That's not what I meant. I'm just curious about what you did during summer break. Last semester, our teacher assigned us to write a social investigation paper based on field interviews. After summer break began, I started working at a factory in the Niangzhu district. Liang Tian, who had been worried that she might have been sick or had some trouble, felt relieved upon hearing this. No wonder she looked tired, darker, and thinner. He stuck out his tongue and said, You spent the entire summer working in a factory just to complete one assignment. That's nothing, Tian Qingqing said casually. Engels spent much longer in factories in London and Manchester when he wrote The Condition of the Working Class in England. Liang Tian had just learned about the condition of the working class in England in his Marxist theory class last semester. Not just Engels, many of Marx's papers were written after repeated social investigations. Marxism doesn't come from studies and libraries, but villages and workshops. As Tian Qingqing spoke, the fatigue disappeared from her face, and her eyes sparkled with brightness. Do you remember what Engels said in the preface to The Condition of the Working Class in England? Since Liang Tian hadn't read Engels's complete work, he couldn't answer. He listened as Tian Qingqing cleared her throat and softly recited, Working men, I dedicate a work to you in which I have tried to lay before my German countrymen a faithful picture of your conditions, sufferings and struggles, hopes and prospects. I have lived long enough amidst you to know something about your circumstances. I have devoted to their knowledge my most serious attention. I have studied all the various official and non-official documents as far as I was able to get hold of them. I have not been satisfied with this. I wanted more than a mere abstract knowledge of my subject. I wanted to see you in your own homes, to observe you in your everyday life, to chat with you on your condition and grievances, to witness your struggles against the social and political power of your oppressors. I have done so. I forsook the company and the dinner parties, the port wine and champagne of the middle classes, and devoted my leisure hours almost exclusively to the intercourse with plain working men. I am both glad and proud of having done so." She stopped reciting here, her face showing an expression of excitement. Liang Tian thought about how he had spent his summer comfortably reading at home, rarely even going out. He had originally planned to share his thoughts on reading Marx and Engels' works with Tian Qingqing. Still, after hearing Engels' words, he suddenly dropped that idea and awkwardly asked, "So, have you finished writing your social investigation?" "Not yet." Tian Qingqing slightly furrowed her brow and murmured, "This social investigation, I really don't know how to write it." "Why? Isn't a summer of factory work enough?" Tian Qingqing didn't answer Liang Tian. Her face darkened again as it had when they first met, as if covered by a thick layer of clouds, showing an expression of sorrow and confusion. After a long silence, she raised her eyes, looked at Liang Tian, and said, "You asked me what happened. Let me tell you about my experiences at the factory during summer break." Here is Tian Qingqing's narrative. The factory was called Disney Toy Factory, and it was relocated to our Nyangzhou district from Dajiang City's urban area 2 years ago. It was a Chinese-American joint venture that specifically produced children's toys for Disney, employing several hundred male and female workers. I was a temporary worker without a contract, paid by the hour, with no formal labor contract as required by the Labor Management Department, no social insurance, housing fund, or injury insurance. At first, I thought only temporary workers like me were treated this way. But after entering the factory, I discovered that no permanent or temporary workers had contracts. There was no labor union, and all matters concerning hiring, firing, or disputes over ERE compensation were decided solely by the boss's word. While management was very loose and chaotic, worker supervision was extremely strict. The workshop and workers' dormitories were enclosed together by high walls, like a military camp or prison. In fact, it was quite similar to both. Once workers entered the factory, they ate, drank, and lived entirely inside. Even feminine hygiene products for female workers were purchased uniformly by the factory, and no one below management level could leave without approval. Between the workshop and dormitories was an open-air passage where workers would get some fresh air during breaks when they felt stifled in their rooms. Like the exercise yard in prison movies, this was where workers who rarely had time to talk during work could chat, joke, play cards, or chess. That's where I met Ah Ying. Ah Ying was a worker in the mold workshop from the poorest northern mountain region. She had suffered a serious illness in childhood that went untreated due to poverty, leaving her with a disability that made her walk unsteadily, swaying as she moved. She left home at 15 to make her way in the world. Being alone, she often faced bullying. When she first arrived in Dajiang, she was cheated out of all her money by an illegal job agent and ended up homeless, sleeping on manhole covers in the corners of the industrial district for several days. "You don't know, my body was covered in mosquito bites, bump upon bump," Ah Ying said, her tone calm as if telling someone else's story. She was a warm-hearted person with a sharp personality, like a small but hard stone from the wild northern mountains. One morning, when we finally got permission to leave the factory, we passed a food stall and saw a city management officer flip over the stall and try to confiscate the cooking equipment. The vendor was an elderly man who begged while clutching the officer's leg, only to be kicked away. Seeing this, Ah Ying's dark, thin face filled with anger. She cursed bandits and grabbed the officer's arm, demanding he return the equipment, asking, "How will the old man eat without these?" The officer, looking fierce, shoved Ah Ying hard. She nearly fell due to her unsteady legs, but she wouldn't let go of his arm. As they remained in deadlock, the officer called the police, who berated Ah Ying without listening to reason and threatened to lock her up if she continued to make trouble and obstruct official business. Back from the street, Ah Ying was so angry that her face turned pale. That vendor was about my father's age. If my father were alive... Her eyes reddened as she spoke, and she went to work without eating lunch. That's the kind of worker Ah Ying was, always ready to stand up against injustice and help others. Once she told me, "Sister, you're a university student. In the future, you must speak up for us, working brothers and sisters." When I heard these words full of earnest expectation, her small frame suddenly seemed to grow taller. Ah Ying was married with a 3-year-old child named Little Iron Hammer. As soon as Little Iron Hammer learned to walk, he was sent back to her husband's hometown. Her husband, Li Guo, came from the same impoverished northern mountain region as her. He also worked at the Disney toy factory in the same workshop as his wife. Once, Li Guo's hand was caught in the lathe's sharp mold cutter, severing 2 fingers. The workshop manager didn't even send him to the hospital, only having him receive basic first aid at the factory clinic. They gave him 500 yuan and dismissed him. The toy factory's mold lathes were highly dangerous, and incidents of workers losing fingers happened periodically. Since the factory neither bought injury insurance for workers nor signed labor contracts, they would simply pay a few hundred yuan to dismiss the worker each time an injury occurred. Everyone seemed to have grown accustomed to it. When I first entered the factory, Ah Ying told me about it. In the boss's eyes, a worker's fingers are worth just a few hundred yuan, but for the injured workers, it's their entire life, Ah Ying said indignantly. At that moment, she was clearly thinking of her husband Li Guo. After being dismissed, Li Guo never found another job and had no choice but to return to his hometown. Ah Ying treated me as a close friend and often shared her innermost thoughts. She talked most about her son, Little Iron Hammer. Little Iron Hammer is such a good boy. He could recite Tang and song poetry before he was even 3. Whenever she spoke of her son, Ah Ying's usually melancholic face would fill with tenderness, her eyes brimming with a mother's deep love. She called her son once every month, spending almost her entire salary on long-distance calls after buying milk powder and clothes for him. To teach her son poetry, Ah Ying had purchased a complete collection of ancient Chinese poetry, and she could recite almost everything from the Book of Songs, songs of Chu and Han Dynasty ballads, to Tang and song poetry. "When Little Iron Hammer grows up, I want him to become a poet," she would say dreamily. One day, in the open-air passage, Ah Ying suddenly called me over and secretly handed me a crumpled notebook, whispering as if afraid others might hear. "Sister, I wrote a poem. Could you take a look at it?" I was initially surprised but quickly agreed, taking the notebook from her hands. Opening it, I found indeed a poem, an ancient poem written in the style of Han Dynasty ballads, titled The Ballad of Severed Fingers. Clang and clang again, the machine press works away. People move with machinery, rhythm must not stray. Right hand feeds the iron, left hand takes away. 1 second back and forth, tension every way. 36,000 seconds, 10 hours every day. Numbness comes with time, 1,000 weights descend to stay. Muscles turn to mush, blood sprays on the walls gray. Each finger linked to heart, pain beside machine we lay. In this metal village, thousands lose fingers this way. Protection's cost is small, just add guards to stay. A few hundred yuan boss won't spare to pay. Officials side with wealth, snort, and turn away. Used to what they see, claim, too busy today. The injured get near nothing and go home maimed to stay. Wife and children weep, mother points to heaven's way. Then comes one with severed arm, sharing tales of dismay. Lost fingers, sad indeed, but arms I still can sway. Now I cannot farm. How shall I earn my pay? Have heard of coal mine workers, whose fate's even worse. Wind tunnels left unfixed, gas takes lives away. Gold miners have it worst, sign life and death to stay. 10,000 for a life, no chance to bargain's way. Dead bodies left in the wild, flesh feeds greed's wild prey. Wealth rolls endlessly in, tears flow day by day. We who lost limbs here, lucky still to stay. Life is preserved indeed, but pain lasts night and day. Martyrs come in dreams, red flag lit blood's way. Why beneath red flag have masters turned to prey? Wild laughs and bitter cries, songs both sad and brave convey. Clang and clang again, workers have their say. Clang and clang again, sun rises east today. The author of this poem is Li Jiming, and its original title is Lamentation of 1,000 Severed Fingers. Author's note. After reading Ying's poem, I suddenly thought of my parents who went to work in Guangdong and whose fate remained unknown. I was deeply shaken and couldn't speak for a long while. Seeing my silence, Ying's face reddened and she said embarrassedly, "Sister, I only went to elementary school. I don't really know how to write poetry. Please don't laugh at me." "No, Sister Ying, you wrote wonderfully." I rubbed my eyes and couldn't help but hug her. "You are a true poet." At this point in her story, Tian Qing paused, her eyes reddening, as if still immersed in the poem's imagery. Clang and clang again, workers have their say. It's written so well, Liang Tian couldn't help but exclaim. In his mind, he pictured a small-framed, dark-skinned woman with resilient eyes, gradually merging with Tian Qing's image until they became one person.
What happened next?
He asked. Later, Tian Qing paused briefly, then continued. About half a month ago, just as I was about to leave the toy factory, something suddenly happened. Worker Foruman Guan's right hand was severed by the machine, not just one finger this time, but all 5 fingers of his right hand, cut clean off. As usual, the factory gave him a few hundred yuan and tried to dismiss him. Foruman Guan was almost 50 and had been with the factory since it opened. Now, with all 5 fingers of his right hand gone, it meant no factory would ever hire him again, leaving him with no means to support himself for the rest of his life. He begged the boss not to fire him, but was beaten by security guards instead. In desperation, he climbed to the factory roof and threatened to jump, demanding injury compensation. But the boss not only refused to yield, but called the police, who quickly arrived and took Foruman Guan to the police station. Foruman Guan's fate reminded me of a passage from Marx's Capital that our teacher quoted in Marxist theory class. With adequate profit, capital is very bold. A certain 50% will trigger it to positive action. 100% will make it ready to trample on all human laws. 300%. And there is not a crime at which it will scruple, nor a risk it will not run, even to the chance of its owner being hanged. This incident caused an uproar in the toy factory. The workers were outraged and flooded to the front of the administration building to protest, declaring a strike. The protesters surrounded the building so tightly that not even water could seep through, continuously shouting slogans, "Release Foruman Guan immediately!" "Fair compensation for injured workers!" "Stop unfair dismissals!" "Establish a workers' union now!" The slogans echoed through the sky. Leading the chants was Ying. She wore a red, long-sleeved t-shirt, and sweat streamed down her dark reddish face under the intense sunlight. Her eyes flashed with strange brilliance, and her small frame stood out prominently among the indignant crowd. Her voice had grown hoarse from shouting, and each slogan seemed to take all her strength, with veins bulging on her neck, reminiscent of a heroic woman martyr from the movies. Later, to make Ying's voice carry further, workers lifted her up. The diminutive Ying suddenly became tall, and facing the sea of people, she cleared her throat and began singing, "We workers have power." She wasn't familiar with the lyrics, stumbling at first, and her pitch wasn't quite right, but she gradually became more fluid. She sang while keeping time with her raised hands. Soon, the workers joined in. "We workers have power, working busy every day, for liberation." The voices gradually merged, growing louder and more magnificent, forming a soul-stirring force. Initially, the factory owner had wanted to call the police to suppress them, but seeing this scene, he lost his nerve. Tian Qingqing paused again here, her chest heaving, tears of emotion gleaming in her eyes. Her narrative also moved Liang Tian, and he eagerly asked, "What happened then?" Later, the factory owner negotiated with the workers' representatives, led by Ying. He personally agreed to most of their demands, including immediately releasing Foruman Guan, promising him compensation, and pledging to quickly sign formal labor contracts with all workers and provide social insurance. In short, except for establishing a union, all the workers' demands were met. Initially worried about Ying and the workers, Liang Tian couldn't help but clap and exclaim, "That outcome? That's wonderful!" "Don't be too quick to celebrate." Tian Qingqing glanced at him and said, "The very next day after Ying and the workers returned to work, a group of police suddenly arrived and arrested Ying right from the workshop floor, charging her with picking quarrels and provoking trouble. The factory owner also went back on his promises. Except for paying Foruman Guan's compensation, he reneged on everything else. The next day, several workers and I visited Ying at the police station. We found her in the same detention center where Foruman Guan had been held. She looked exhausted from lack of sleep, with bloodshot eyes. I tried to comfort her. "Sister Ying, don't worry. We're working on getting you released soon." She seemed completely unconcerned about her situation and instead comforted me. "Sister, don't worry about me. I haven't committed any crime. What's there to fear?" She pursed her lips like a child and said righteously, "I may not be highly educated, but I've studied the Constitution. It clearly states that workers are the leading class of this country. I just wanted to establish our own workers' union. What's wrong with that?" Seeing her aggrieved expression, I didn't know how to respond. Finally, I said, "Sister Ying, let me sing you a song." Clearing my throat, I sang Zhang Shaohan's latest song, "Invisible Wings." I finally see all dreams blooming, the youth we chase, how bright our songs ring. I finally soar, gazing fearlessly with my heart. Wherever the wind blows, let's fly far away. After singing this song, I left the detention center. Several factory workers and I kept advocating for Ying for the next few days. She was finally released yesterday, so I rushed back to school. Hearing this, Liang Tian felt as if he had watched an epic film and felt deeply moved. "This experience would make quite a social investigation report," he murmured, "but I really don't know how to write it." "Why?" Liang Tian asked, puzzled. "Because," Tian Qingqing said, "I don't know whether Ying and the toy factory workers achieved victory or suffered defeat." Seeing her confused expression, Liang Tian also felt perplexed and couldn't help wondering, if Engels faced this question, how would he answer? 5. Finding Meng Fei. Ever since starting her website, Gu Zheng had turned the living room of her 2-bedroom apartment into an office. Once used for dining, the small square table was moved to the center of the room, with a high-performance computer on it, the only piece of office equipment the website had acquired. When she previously worked as a lawyer, she bought a laptop to carry around conveniently since her office was equipped with computers. The day before yesterday, at dinner, when she heard from Liang Tian about Tian Qingqing's situation, something stirred in her heart. This girl's unfortunate background reminded her of her own experiences, especially when she heard that the person funding Tian Qingqing's university education had been imprisoned. She immediately thought of Wang Sheng, who was serving his sentence at a labor reform farm. She knew Wang Sheng had once been assigned to teach at Niangzhou Normal School for 2 years. Could it really be such a coincidence? After returning that day, Gu Zheng kept pondering this matter and thinking about how Tian Qingqing struggled with her studies and life, unable to afford a second-hand laptop. An idea occurred to her. Since she wasn't using her laptop anymore anyway, why not give it to Tian Qingqing? The next morning, while accompanying Kestrel to South Lake, Gu Zheng brought the laptop for Liang Tian to give to Tian Qingqing. Liang Tian was overjoyed, exclaiming, "Long live Auntie," and said he would thank her on Tian Qingqing's behalf. "How will you thank me?" Gu Zheng teased him. Quick-witted and sweet-talking, Liang Tian replied, "How to thank you? By working hard, of course." Gu Zheng wanted to say more, but seeing Kestrel beside them, she worried she might say something to embarrass Liang Tian, so she swallowed her words. The three spent half a day at South Lake and had a unique outdoor grilled fish lunch by the lakeside. In the afternoon, Liang Tian said he needed to accompany his mother to buy some things to take home, and Gu Zheng, needing to handle website matters, returned first. Back in her two-bedroom apartment, she eagerly opened her computer. Reading and responding to online consultations had become her daily routine. Consultation with Gu Zheng had become like an invisible thread connecting her with countless strangers. Among them were women, men, young people, the elderly, workers, farmers, teachers, and officials. Their messages covered all sorts of content, some seeking legal advice, some confiding their difficulties and suffering in life and work, and some directly asking for help. 2 days ago, a Yunnan girl using the username Red Poppy sent her a message saying her supervisor had sexually assaulted her. After reporting it to higher authorities, not only was her supervisor not investigated, but she faced retaliation and was falsely accused of drug use and dismissed. Multiple appeals and complaints to relevant departments had yielded no results. The girl wrote to Consultation with Gu Zheng for help. "I'm about to break down, Sister Gu Zheng. What should I do?" Gu Zheng could sense the girl's desperation between the lines, which reminded her of Liu Jia. She had written a long reply to Red Poppy, but hadn't received a response, which left her somewhat worried. Now, when Gu Zheng opened her inbox, there was indeed a message, but the sender wasn't Red Poppy, it was an unfamiliar username, Meteor Shower. Gu Zheng opened the message, and a line of text jumped out at her. Meng Fei and her child live at 138 Yuyang Street, next to District No. 1 Elementary School, in Niangzhou District. Gu Zheng nearly jumped from her chair. Since Wang Sheng's imprisonment, she hadn't stopped trying to locate Meng Fei. Finding Meng Fei would help unravel the key questions in Wang Sheng's case against Wu Bozhong, as well as the secrets between her brother Zhong Tianyi and Meng Fei. But 2 years had passed, and mother and daughter seemed to have vanished from the world without a trace. She had almost given up hope. This unexpected message rekindled the dying flame in Gu Zheng's heart. Who sent the message? How did they know she was looking for Meng Fei and her daughter? Why did they want to tell her? A series of questions flooded Gu Zheng's mind. To send messages to Consultation with Gu Zheng required registration, but when she checked the user profile, it only showed the gender as female, with no other information. Given that they contacted her through Consultation with Gu Zheng thought this person must know about her situation. They clearly had their own motives, though there was another possibility. This person could be an acquaintance or friend of hers, her brother Zhong Tianyi, or even Wang Sheng, who had discovered Meng Fei's whereabouts and wanted to tell her but feared retaliation if their identity was revealed, so they chose this method. Gu Zheng's mind raced with possibilities, and she felt as if she were in the middle of a suspense thriller, both nervous and excited. Regardless, this information was likely true. She decided to find Meng Fei immediately. Gu Zheng took a shuttle bus early the next morning to Niangzhou Lake. The express bus from Dajiang to Niangzhou County Town ran every 15 minutes, taking less than an hour. After getting off at the bus station, Gu Zheng bought some fruit and a Teletubbies balloon from a nearby supermarket, asked the store owner for directions, and headed toward Niangzhou District No. 1 Elementary School. Niangzhou County wasn't unfamiliar to Gu Zheng. Though it had been upgraded to a district many years ago, locals still called it the county town. Several years earlier, shortly after joining the Junding law firm, she had attended a lawyer training program organized by the Provincial Justice Department. She had explored the town quite a bit then. Compared to a few years ago, the town had become more bustling and prosperous, with many new high-rises. The streets were full of fashionable young people, and in terms of modernity, it wasn't far behind Dajiang at all. After walking for about 10 minutes, she reached the elementary school. The large characters reading Niangzhou District No. 1 Elementary School were striking and visible from far away. Right next to it was Yuyang Street. The street was narrow, just wide enough for one truck to pass. The old gravel road had been replaced with cement. Both sides were lined with old residential buildings, occasionally interrupted by newly built small structures, mainly 2 or 3 stories high, square like matchboxes. Soon, Guzheng found 138 Yuyang Street. It was a 2-story building with colorful mosaic tiles embedded in the street-facing wall, glittering like a square piece of jade in the sunlight. The main door was closed tightly. Guzheng knocked, but no one answered. She knocked several more times, still with no response. Seeing an elderly woman sitting in the sun at the neighboring doorway, Guzheng walked over and asked, "Ma'am, is anyone home there?" The old woman, who had silver hair and was around 70 or 80, shielded her eyes to look at Guzheng. "Yes, they went out to buy breakfast this morning." The old woman was missing several teeth, making her speech slightly slurred and unclear. "They always keep their door closed, from morning till night."
Is it a woman with a little girl? Guzheng asked.
"Yes, mother and daughter with a housekeeper," the old woman said, eyeing her warily. "Who are you to them?"
I'm their relative from the provincial capital, Guzheng said.
The old woman glanced at the fruit and balloons she was carrying and muttered, "They've lived here so long but rarely get visitors. Except for the housekeeper going out to buy groceries, they hardly ever leave." She suddenly stopped mid-sentence as if afraid she'd said too much. Guzheng gave a soft "oh" and returned to the front door to knock again. This time, after just 2 knocks, the door opened. A middle-aged woman dressed like a villager appeared, asking in an interrogating tone, "Who are you looking for?" "I'm looking for Meng Fei." Guzheng hesitated before answering. "What's your relation to her?" Guzheng repeated what she had told the old woman, but the middle-aged woman still showed no intention of letting her in. Just then, another woman's voice came from inside. "Who is it?" The voice was soft and pleasant, different from the local Niangzhu Lake accent. It was perfect standard Mandarin. Guzheng found it familiar. Her heart began to pound as she impulsively pushed at the door. It opened, and she saw a woman coming down from upstairs. That beautiful face, that graceful figure. It was Meng Fei. Meng Fei, standing on the stairs, also saw Guzheng. "It's you, Guzheng, sister-in-law." The 2 women stared at each other, speechless. After a while, Meng Fei sent the housekeeper away and took Guzheng to the living room. Though small, the room was furnished with red mahogany furniture of fine quality and style, clearly not purchased locally. A 47-inch LCD TV, something only wealthy businessmen in the provincial capital could afford. While Meng Fei was making tea, Guzheng studied her. After several years, Meng Fei seemed slightly heavier than before, but still maintained her charm and allure. The only difference was a new melancholy on her face that hadn't been there before. "I've been looking for you all these years. Never thought you 2 would be living here," Guzheng murmured. "By the way, where's An?" "An, she's at kindergarten." Meng Fei placed a cup of tea in front of Guzheng, her expression much calmer than before. "Why are you looking for me? Are you here to confront me on your brother's behalf, or—" Guzheng saw a guarded expression on Meng Fei's face. When she mentioned her brother, Guzheng's heart trembled involuntarily. She realized that after her brother married Meng Fei, she had rarely visited them or even called Meng Fei sister-in-law. Now, more than 2 years after her brother's death, suddenly seeing Meng Fei stirred complex emotions in her, as if she were seeing her deceased brother. "Why are you looking for me?" Meng Fei kept repeating, staring at Guzheng like a stranger. "What do you want?" Guzheng lowered her head, opened her bag, and took out a certificate. "This is the property deed for your duplex apartment. My brother left a will before he died, asking me to give this to you. You and An are the legal heirs to this property." She handed the property deed to Meng Fei. Meng Fei took it, her hands trembling like sifting chaff. Suddenly, she lowered her face, bent over the deed, and began sobbing quietly, saying between sobs, "I wronged your brother." Then she broke into loud wails. Gu Zhang watched Meng Fei's violently shaking shoulders, tears welling up in her own eyes, too. After what seemed like an eternity, Meng Fei raised her head and said to Gu Zhang, "I know you've been looking for me. They were afraid you'd find me, so they bought this house for me to live in. They hired a housekeeper, claiming she would care for me and Anan, but really she's here to watch us." Meng Fei wiped the tears from her face and continued with a resigned tone. "Gu Zhang, I know what you want to ask. Go ahead now. I'll tell you everything." "Good." Gu Zhang turned on the voice recorder she used when she was a lawyer and said, "Let's start with Wang Sheng's defamation case from 2 years ago.